we'll start with the karakia and see where we get to. So if you let me work my way through this, appreciate that. Whakataka te ho ki te uru. Whakataka te ho ki te tonga. Kia makinakina ki uta. Kia matara ki tai. Ihi ake ana te atakura. He teo, he huka, he hohu, tihe, Maori ora. Promise of a glorious day. I always look at that when I look to the translations. So I always think that's appropriate for the day of an Audit and Risk Committee, but we'll see how we go. We do have a pretty full agenda. When I caught up with Steve, he sort of raised his eyebrows and said, Bruce, this is a big agenda. And it probably is. But a couple of things just to help us along the way. Haidee, you're in control. If you think we need a break, tell us, and we'll certainly make a 5-minute break or whatever if we need to at an appropriate stage. The business is pretty much as we have it. There has been one late adjustment to the second recommendation that comes under the water rate item. It's item 2.7, which we'll deal with. It's largely procedural, but it's really about appropriate routing of the issue through the Finance and Performance Committee to Council, and what we're recommending are the roles. So we'll come to that when we deal with 2.7. And at the conclusion of the meeting, just as we try and work things through, I'd just like a word of committee time for a couple of other matters that we'd just like to work through. I suspect probably better dealt with more formally as a committee later on in future meetings, but we're just trying to get ourselves going, which actually leads me to probably the point I should have opened, which is for those of you that are established members of the committee, I hope you recognise some of the change that is starting to occur. And I just want to do a big shout out to Stephen and Richard and their teams, to you, Barbara, as well, essentially to management. I famously said to Barbara last year, I just wonder about the quality of our papers. And I was a bit cheeky, and she said, really? And regardless of whether I'm right or wrong, and more likely to be wrong, I just want to reflect that I am encouraged, Stephen, by what has been produced. And I hope that's reflected firstly in my thanks, but secondly in the recognition of the members as we go through the papers. I'm also deeply appreciative that since the last meeting, all of you, Barbara and team, have given me time to express my views and to perhaps even stamp a wee bit of my own direction on the committee. So that means that at the end, if any members wish to raise questions about process, procedure, papers, give me a yell. It's me that's trying to learn how to help and work best with you folk at Wellington. So that's great. Rightio, if we were to deal with the apologies, how are we going here? Looks like
we've got the full subcommittee and I haven't received any apologies as yet. Brilliant.
Okay, and just to note that Diane proposes to join us, but she said that she'd just be a wee bit late, possibly around about a quarter of an hour's time. So there's no apologies to sustain. So I'll move on to conflict of interest declarations. Are there any matters on the agenda that people need to note their interests? There being none, let's move to the confirmation of the minutes. Believe it or not, we last met on the 12th of October, when, just as it seems like too late today, Barbara, to say Happy New Year, I actually wished you guys a Happy Christmas, which was miles too early. So let's deal with the minutes of the 12th of October, please. For the sake of a online meeting, what I would propose is that for these motions, that as chair, I move them. So I will do that. So I would look for a seconder, please. Can I have a seconder for these minutes? Thank you, Jenny. Appreciate that. Are there any matters of correction or factual accuracy with these minutes that people would like to raise? They're not. They look like the media knows that. So look, I'll put that motion. Sorry, Haidee, I should always check. It's so different with different councils. Are you happy to take this one on voice?
It would be great if we could vote by reaction, please, just so that we can take a screenshot for our records.
Okay, so you need us to raise our hands, correct?
To use the green tick under the reaction button,
rightio.
Or the red cross as preferred.
Okay, rightio. Oh, you're making me, you're testing my skill here. Here we go, rightio. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please put the green tick up.
I was not present, so I can't vote.
Right, thank you. That was, sorry.
Linda.
Well, Linda, sorry, just trying to locate the voice where it's coming from. Okay, those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on, items not on the agenda, as I've noted at the end of this, I will ask you to join me with a short meeting or continuation, informal meeting after the formal closure. I've got no requests for public participation at this stage, so I think that leaves us to be able to move into general business and item 2.1. So I'm looking to, have I got names Wendy and Meredith around? Are you folk handy to lead us? Oh, there we are. I should look for two on one screen, shouldn't I? Sorry about that. Hey, we're in your hands, please, to give us a quick shot at this, and then we'll look at the motion. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou, and because the very first, this is the first audit and risk for Wendy, I wanted to formally introduce her, particularly to you, Chair, because you've not had the opportunity to meet Wendy, our new Health, Safety and Security Manager, who started on 20th of September. So I will hand over to her.
Appreciate you being here.
Thank you. All right. Okay, yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I just want to highlight some of the things from the report. Obviously, it's been an interesting time to come into the role with COVID very much playing a big part in what we're doing. Just a couple of key things to highlight. The personal confrontation remains one of our top hazards for our frontline staff. And as you'll be aware, a video called Facing Conflict on the Frontline was developed and released in October last year. This raised a lot of awareness, and it raised awareness for staff to know they do not need to put up with the type of behaviour that's been important, an important message for them. Ensuring staff report incidents of this nature through Risk Manager means that we've seen numbers continue to be high, which is also consistent with previous reporting. And we are continuing to wrap support around staff, both formally and informally, that are faced in these situations. I'm excited to report that the procurement of our new health and safety reporting system has commenced and has gone live on GETS, and tenders close on the 21st of February and will be evaluated following that. So that's good progress there. Prior to Christmas, there was a lot of work done by the team just around the COVID response work. And in the report, just around the COVID vaccination mandates. So we spent a lot of time doing the health and safety risk assessments for the organisation. And with over 400 services across council, we decided to use a more in-depth WorkSafe risk assessment rather than the assessment released by government at the time. And this assessment looked at a number of areas and allowed council to produce a risk assessment for each role category. Mental health and wellbeing. The council has undertaken additional work to support staff, including raising awareness of mental distress, training leaders and supporting staff to support others experiencing mental distress. And then in December, we actually ran a webinar, Being Well at Council, with Jackie Maguire, who's a registered clinical psychologist. And Jackie spoke about being about wellbeing in a COVID-19 world and living with COVID, which is even more importantly, and how to make sure we're looking after our general wellbeing. We had a really high uptake of people actually joining that webinar, which was great. And in February this year, so commencing this month, the Being Well at Council program officially commences. with planned, regular and ongoing communications and engagements for staff. And our first webinar will be held in March. So happy to answer any questions.
Right, sorry about that. Look, Wendy, just to say firstly again, welcome and thank you for a very comprehensive report. This is an important or a high risk, so it does warrant the level of reporting that you're doing and indeed the number of committees that it traipses through. So I do appreciate that. I'm very interested from a systems perspective how we are dealing with things. I'd also like to refer members also to the latter part of your written report where we look at the due diligence obligations, which is important to those that are officers. So do we have questions or comments people would like to raise at this point? Yes, Jenny.
Thanks, Bruce. I was just wondering, I mean, obviously we haven't been able to do as many health and safety due diligence visits because of COVID, and that looks like it'll continue for the near future. Do we have plans about how we can otherwise do our due diligence requirements when these site visits aren't really possible? Have we given any thought to that?
Yeah, definitely. We believe that we can continue doing site visits and ensuring that we are keeping ourselves safe while we're doing them. So we're working through a process at the moment of putting in place to continue doing those, because we need to work out how we, living with COVID and in this world, that we need to continue doing this sort of stuff and doing it in the safest way possible. So we are looking at ways of doing that. We do believe that as long as we can, keep ourselves safe, keep others safe and maintain social distancing, wearing the correct, PPE while we're out and about, we want to see that continue and pick up again. The same with some of our health and safety training, where it might have been face-to-face training. We're trying to think outside the square about how some of that training can continue rather than just completely stop.
Thanks, that's really interesting to hear. I guess my other question is just all the information and assessment that we did around COVID and the health risks of each unit. Is that information going to be useful for non-COVID things to do with health and safety? I just am aware we've collected a whole bunch of information and done a whole bunch of work. Have we thought about how that might be extendable and useful just beyond the focus on COVID?
I guess at this point in time, probably no, because we've been so immersed in the COVID world. But you're right, it's a lot of information and a lot of data that's been collected, and potentially it could be used in the future, but we don't know what that looks like just yet.
Yes, it'd be interesting to know when we get out of COVID, won't it, Jenny? Iona, I think you've got a question, please.
Thank you, Bruce and Jenny. Appreciate that. Sorry, Jenny. Sorry, I'm getting. It's not Jenny. It's Wendy, isn't it?
Sorry. That's all right.
I was just wondering. It's just a small thing, but I think it hopefully might help. Just where you've got those health and safety measures, whether we could have some arrows going up and down in the right way, just so. And then the other thing was whether we will. I just can't remember whether we get some longer term trend data. So at some point that we can look at a period, say over 10 years, just to make sure that we are improving it as we go.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's some good points that I'll take away from here. Yeah, look, in terms of reporting, I know that, our current system that we've had in place for a number of years, I'm really excited about the prospect of what's ahead in terms of health and safety systems and what we could potentially get in for the organisation, because I do think we can improve with some of our reporting, and whether that's short-term or long-term reporting, that's where we kind of want to head. We want to be in a space where we are a lot more proactive with our reporting, and we're using that data to proactively manage health and safety rather than reactively. So it's important that as I get my head around this role and what's required and what we need, that's something on the radar in terms of better reporting.
Okay, thanks. And just the other question was, and it might be more appropriate for Barbara, the the incidents where people were complaining about pressure around vaccination, I presume that was an isolated incident. Sorry, it was all a bit confusing. Seemed to be a lot of detail there. Meredith, you'll answer.
Yeah, no answer. It was actually the same employee who entered it into risk manager. And it was, so we've had very little negative response.
Okay.
I think I would probably just add through you, Chair, that the process that we have run organisationally to consult with our staff on both COVID vaccine pass sites and jobs that require vaccinations has been very thorough and fair. And we've been at pains to communicate clearly the reasons for the decisions we've made.
Okay, thank you. And Bruce, sorry, just last thing, I'm just going to have to pop out for another council meeting at 1:30. I was having some technical issues with my password, but I will be back quickly. Thank you.
Good to see you, Anna. Andy, I think you've got a question, sir.
Thank you. Thanks, Bruce. And at some point in time, I will have to duck out as well, but I'll be here for a while yet. Look, the question I've got is there's two items which are on page 25. I just want to see from a systems point of view, they both look quite serious items. The first one of them being the parks one, where somebody's obviously got sick for an extended period of time. I presume that's fairly serious. And the second one being the city housing one, when it's a serious people incident, is what the systems and training approach is to try and avoid the first situation happening again. And I've got no idea how frequent that kind of thing is or how big the risks are. And the second one is what our processes are where there is confrontation within, housing tenant to housing tenant, or people who are not council staff, but people having a conflict with each other, and obviously council staff sort of being in proximity and going, right, what do we do with this?
Firstly, for the first incident that you mentioned in Park Sport and Rec, it's a very unique situation, that one, where, as you know, it was something that was quite dormant for quite a number of time, for a number of months. And as someone was, they actually thought it was a personal thing that was kind of happening, and it took some time to actually backtrack to really understand exactly what had gone on around this fungus that had, gone into their system through the cutting of a particular tree. So really unique, really rare. And as soon as it was brought to our attention and we could backtrack along with specialists and medical specialists, etc., we reported it immediately to WorkSafe, who again also reiterated how rare this really was. In terms of going forward, we will work closely with Park Sport and Rec around the process. At the time, there are a number of factors that we can take on board that will trigger our process around the cutting of this particular tree. And as I say, it is a really rare case. With regards to the tenant and the outside, I guess it's something that it is something that we're going to have to look at and how our staff deal in those situations.
All our staff have received de-escalation training and are well trained within city housing. So we're confident that those systems are in place, but we will continue to work with city housing on how they respond.
So looking at the second one in particular, it seems that the staff involved didn't get involved in trying to de-escalate, but needed to get the police to come and help that. So I guess my question is, what sort of training, guidance, approach do we take in different circumstances? And obviously there's a million different circumstances you might face as to when to go, yes, we can help, and when to go, actually, no, this is too risky, can't help, need to get external assistance.
That is part of the training, identifying those situations where it does get beyond your capabilities and expertise. And, we've got to continue working with our staff so that they recognise those moments and know how to react and exactly what they do. First and foremost, we need to keep them safe and secure. And there are means to do that. So it is reiterating some of those messages to our staff. we don't want to compromise their safety.
Yeah. Okay. Look. So just to finish that. So what you're saying is there are some circumstances when they might be trained in such a way that they'd say, yes, look, I can help in this situation, and others they go, no, this one's beyond me. I need help.
Correct.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mia, that's also across all our frontline services. There is a kind of a point where they have to call the police, and they are well trained in recognising when that is appropriate.
Okay,
Police
that's very helpful.
isn't always as quick as they would like. So, but nevertheless, they know when to walk away.
Okay. Thank you.
Just to welcome Laurie. Councillor Laurie's joined us. Laurie, we're in health and safety, which is probably a pretty easy guess at this stage, item 2.1 on our agenda. Wendy, I've got some sort of systems questions, if that's possible, please. And it may be partly new for me, maybe that I should know, I don't know. Paragraph 23. I'm really pleased from a resource perspective that we're undertaking a review, and you use great words, which are health, safety and security maturity uplift. I like that. That's good. Where are we at the moment in terms of maturity, and on whose scale?
Yeah, so look, I've been doing some work. Obviously, I've been in this role for a few months now, and you know, I've had to kick off just looking at the maturity across the organisation. I had the risk assessment that was completed earlier in the year, which kicked this all off. So that identifies, you know, where our higher risks are across the organisation. And I'm now in the process of recruitment and sort of building my team to be able to actually go out across the organisation and work off a business partner model where we are working alongside business groups in the organisation in all things health, safety and security. So part of that will be to, you know, coach, mentor, advise, guide our business units in all things health, safety and security. And at some stage, it will be good to obviously look back to completing another assessment on where our organisation is at. So we've kind of got a bit of a baseline, I feel, to start with, and you know, where we want to go from there is improvement.
Look, sorry, Meredith.
Sorry, can I just add, that was an external audit that was presented to Audit and Risk last year with the findings, and it was on a 5-point scale.
Yep.
Where we landed quite reactively when we're moving to the proactive number 4 out of the 5. The other framework, the security maturity framework, is the protective security requirements framework from central government. We're the first council in New Zealand to adopt it, and we've got quite a bit of work to do there to get us up to where we would like to be. But they're both external frameworks that are recognised and audited independently.
Brilliant. And look, Wendy, obviously your program of development is essentially, it's a strategy. It's something you've agreed with Meredith and presumably ELT and funded, and is the way that we believe that when we come to the next external assessment, we have ticked off the 4 out of 5 that we're aspiring to. Correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Brilliant. Okay.
Sorry. Sorry.
Go for it, Meredith. That's fine.
It's just the handover period still. I've got
no, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. No worries.
To get to the reactive, the 4 out of 5 is actually over a period of time, and it's not a 12-month period. There's actually quite a lot of work to do for organisational-wide maturity uplift. But we are hoping, or not hoping because that's not a strategy, but we're expecting within the next 2 to 3 years that we will be definitely 3 out of 3, if not 3.5 to 4.
Look, let's have a discussion as things go on. I know you're doing more work, and I want to really encourage you, Wendy, but somewhere down the track, I think it would be good for our committee to have some oversight, Meredith, about actually what is that plan, and again, it's project management, it's risk. What's enabling, what's stopping you from doing that? Because it then feeds directly into us meeting our due diligence obligations under the Act. So I just, if I could see that in your mind as a potential. One other little systems question, though, please, Wendy. I did thank you for all again the detail of the performance information. I'm just interested to know how you look at this, okay? And how do you make an assessment whether we're in the right spot or not in terms of the number of incidences? I'm wondering if you could tell me how can you help me interpret these? I'm looking at the schedules here, section 5. Is this a good position, good result, or a bad? I mean, any incident's bad in one sense, but given that we probably have to accept there will be a level of risk that will crystallise, how do you look at this? How do you look at this table? Section 5. It's on page. It's the one that lists all the individual incidences in the last quarter.
Yeah, look, I guess for me coming into this role, I think one of the things that I'm really keen to do, and because I think in terms of data, you can have all the data in the world in front of you, but we need to understand what is it actually telling us. And I think, like I said before, I want to be able to get into a situation where we're right across all our information and our data, and trying to be proactive rather than just using our data, because we've got to be able to measure it against something. And at this point in time, I struggle to do that as an in my role, in terms of really understanding what is it actually telling us. And so if I'm sort of struggling to do that, then how are we giving that assurity and raising that maturity across the organisation? So one of the key things that I want to do, whether it's through our new system and even prior to that with it coming on board, is really starting to hone in on our data and understanding, one, what it is we're even reporting to our committees, and ensuring that it's the right information. And I think we will get that with some of the training that's coming up with elected members as well, so that we're all on the same page, that you're getting the information that you require, and we're able to actually present the information that's going to be meaningful going forward, rather than just have a whole lot of data for the sake of data. Because you're right, what are we actually really truly measuring this against? And so, we can have data and information from 10 years ago, but I think we've got some work to do in this space to really understand our information and our data in order to be able to uplift where we are now. So that may not have answered your question, but I do think there's a lot of work to do in this space. And part of the maturity framework that I'm working in is that we will have a dedicated role to do exactly that, to assist us with our data and wrap around the story that needs to go with it.
I think it'd be helpful. I mean, firstly, thank you for a very honest answer. And I just want to congratulate you on your openness with us. And I would ask members to respect that as well. That's great. And I think it is important that we also see this through the lens of your eye, because you're the professional, you're the expert, and that's really, really important. I'm just conscious that Andy had one slice of this, and I think he's actually did correct. The ones that he focused on were ones that attracted my eye. But I do want to ask another question that comes from this, which is really about where do we focus our effort? And when I look at this, the good old Parks, Sports and Rec department, division, whatever we call it, keeps coming up. And I want to relate it to other data. So when I see that you've got to pick up in terms of some of the training, I'd want to know, for instance, what's the representation of the Parks, Sports and Rec division in the internal training you've been having? Have we thought about actually, and look, and I am picking on them, but I mean, I'm picking on them because when I look at the data, their name keeps coming up. Do we have a response now that is looking at why do these matters keep coming up in the sports, the Park, Sports and Rec division?
Yeah, look, Park, Sport and Recreation are actually have the largest workforce in our organisation. They have varied services, so they have operational staff that are out there working in the field. They have got a number of risks that fall into their day-to-day work tasks and operations. And they manage not only internally but externally various events and have a lot of things happening on their facilities and in their workspaces. So there's two ways you can look at this. I guess one way is that there's been a lot of work done in this business unit over many years to actually ensure that health, safety and security is integrated into what they do. And they are very good at reporting. So that's a positive. So we do get a lot of reporting that comes out of that business unit. And that does help, it helps with key learnings. And so, the more near miss reporting we can get, we get some key learnings out of that. And, it ensures that we don't have significant incidents. So that's what we're all trying to avoid. But yeah, look, they take their, inductions and training very seriously. They have quite a comprehensive competency matrix assigned to each role that they have in their business unit. And but it's got to be ongoing, it's continuous. So and there has been a bit of churn in terms of staff turnover. So we've got to continue working with them. They're very dedicated to health and safety. And we need to continue to support them.
Well, thank you for that. And what I'm doing here, for instance, is, and I won't take it too much further. If I look at page 15 of 185, where we've got the lead indicators and we've got things like the number of health and safety reps, etc. I would hope that we're doing the thinking. So is an area, in this case, our most populous division, well represented in these stats here as being involved. So I take it they are, and that's tremendous. And I don't, in one sense, want to take that any further. But do appreciate that. And as I say, starting this off, very interested to know how you think through what this data is telling us, because, it will help us, I think, as generally as officers, look at this. So I just wonder, for the rest of the members, if I could just refer you then to page 13 of 185, which actually has the due diligence. And elected members, I would like to pause just for a moment and note that actually this is really should be important to us as elected members, or those of us that are elected members, and obviously you as well, Barbara, if not your ELT. Are we happy that we are meeting our due diligence obligations? It's something which, in looking towards the motion, we should think about. Members, is there any questions you want to ask specifically about the due diligence? Good, we're happy. Look at that, Wendy. That's great. So that's superb. I wonder if I could move us to then the recommendations. Probably should have moved at the start, but I haven't. The recommendations are reasonably simple. Firstly, that we receive the information. And secondly, we recommend that this be forwarded to the Finance Performance Committee to receive the information. In other words, in fullness of the report that you've given us, Wendy, which I appreciate that. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Sean. I've seen your hand up. Thank you, mate. So is there any discussion on the motion? There being none, if you go to your reactions box, please, all those in favour, please raise your green tick. Thank you. And those against would obviously put up a red cross. We're right there, Haiti?
It's carried, thank you.
Thank you very much, appreciate that. Can we move then, please, to item 2.2, which is our 3-year forward work program, and welcome to Richard. And Richard's one of my best mates. This is a lot of hard work by him, and he listened to me. So thank you, Richard. We're in your hands, buddy.
Thanks, Bruce, for the introduction. I guess the key message for this paper is the 3-year forward work program takes a longer term view of the subcommittee's responsibilities, and it allocates attention fairly to each of the subcommittee's terms of reference responsibilities, rather than meeting by meeting. The paper brings attention to 2 other features which are new this time around. One is Chief Officer updates at each meeting, which are penciled in. First will be today. And the second one is litigation matters update. General Counsel will be presenting on that later. The members will have an opportunity to review the forward programme at each meeting. It's not set in stone, it's sort of a stake in the sand, I see it, this forward work programme. That will give you a chance to consider any changing or emerging risk profiles, which is actually the next agenda item after this, and then reflect those in the forward programme. Just to point out for the eagle-eyed, today's Audit New Zealand Plan and Engagement Letter, which is a dot on the chart, will not be circulated at this meeting. It's going to be circulated between now and May. The last point, some of the forward work programs are much later on the agenda. It makes it look like we've got a very big, heavy agenda going forward, but those individual line items will actually be consolidated into papers. So rather than there being 16 agenda items, there'll only really be 5 or 6 meetings. So yes, the paper seeks members' approval of the programme, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Richard. And again, thank you for your hard work on this. Look, I was keen, members, that we have a forward work program for 3 years. It is. I think I might have used the words before. There is a natural flow, routine, whatever you want to call it, to Audit and Risk Committee, and I think we should be planned about it and try and work it through. Which is the first thing that Richard's helped us with by having a 3-year plan. The second thing was actually starting to, dare I say it, introduce 1 or 2 additional things that I think a good risk committee should do. And I guess in some ways I've been encouraged through my appointment to bring to the committee, hence the discussions with the senior managers as we have them coming through. So yes, we do get a chance to look at this at each meeting, but at this stage, are there any questions members would like to raise at this point? Yes. Oh, sorry. Firstly, Sean, and then Linda.
Yes, thanks very much, and Happy New Year, everybody. I guess when I was thinking about a forward work program, I was really looking for the operational aspects. So when does Evans Bay Parade Phase 1 finish? When does Phase 2 going to start? That sort of thing. And I was wondering if that was somehow embedded in here, but I'm not seeing it. Or, I mean, I don't know if other members of the committee also thought that was what we were looking for, or this seems to be more of a response to the statutory requirements and more of the, I suppose, shared services activities.
Councillor Ratchpat, so I can reply to that. I think the particular items you're referring to would come through your committee in terms of the forward program, in terms of the major projects. This is really looking at this committee's terms of reference, and they tend to be, as you say, kind of more statutory driven, but there are other elements to it. But specifically, the kind of things you're referring to would be part of the forward program for I would say, your committee. And actually, if you think about the system that we've put in place for all committees, we've got a forward agenda section which looks largely 2 months ahead, and I guess over time we could take a broader view of that. So yeah, I think what you're asking for is probably not appropriate for this committee, unless there was a particular risk that was identified with one of those projects.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe I'll take it offline with Siobhan, and I accept we've got the forward program, but it's more about meetings, and it's not quite the sort of work program that I'm used to seeing in.
I understand that, Sean, and look, if you've got any further concerns, you're welcome to come to me on that one as well, because this is in effect Richard responding to my request, and in fact my creation.
If not, we'll have to see. But it's just really to be able to understand how we are managing our human resources and contractors across the 3-year program, I suppose. You know, and dovetailing Wellington Water, and it just to give that sort of more global overview that where our folks are being managed, so that, you know, if we are, my colleagues do want to build another cycleway out of sync.
Oh, we've lost you there. I have. Has anybody else here, Sean?
No, I can't hear Sean.
Sean, we've lost you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now, Sean.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, you might have seen me moving around trying to find stuff. Over the break, I've relocated my office and to make way for a rumpus room for the kids. And I'm a little bit at sea at the moment. I'm getting my feed, my audio feed through a Yui Boom, which is also picking up every email which you've just heard. And I don't have things, so if you see me sort of like looking around and so on, that's the reason why, and I apologise for it.
Thank you, Sean. Linda, I think you had a question first, then Roy.
You're on mute, Linda.
Is that better?
Yep, yeah, Linda.
Sorry about that. I thought this was a fantastic work program for us going ahead and gave us some structure to all the risks that we are supposed to manage. I was just wondering whether there was any opportunity to bring forward the Chief Infrastructure and Projects briefing up in the list of briefings. It's kind of scheduled for, I think, June 23. And I do feel that's an area that does pose a lot of risk for us, and so that might be helpful.
Okay, well, there was a bit of mirth about the order of this list, Linda. So the fact that we should apply a bit of science may not be a bad thing. Can you leave that for Stephen and me to have a discussion?
Yep,
and
sure.
Probably with the relevant GM as well. So look,
Yep.
fair enough, fair point, and I've asked for feedback. That's good feedback. Roy?
Thank you, Chair. My comments are around the external audit. Firstly, is anybody from Audit New Zealand or the OAG coming to this meeting at any time? I can't see.
Yes, I can confirm that. Karen is actually involved in another assignment with a government agency, and she'll be here at 2:30, although she said that a couple of her officers will be at this meeting, and I'm just looking to see if I can see them online. But regardless of that, she will be here at about 2:30.
All right, so at this meeting, according to the schedule, we're due to look at the audit plan and the engagement letter. Is that going to happen?
Perhaps if I can update the committee on that, and Bruce, our chair, is across this too.
Okay.
I had a conversation with Karen Young late last week, and they're about a month away from landing that audit plan, which is probably not all that satisfactory from our perspective. And obviously our next meeting is not until May. I have said to Karen, and this might be a topic to raise when she gets here, ideally if we had that plan by the end of February, and Sarah Hay, myself and Bruce is able to meet with her and basically satisfy ourselves that will be, that the audit will be delivered before the election. We could then circulate that audit plan to this committee ahead of basically that rubber stamp in May, because at the moment they're intending to start their audit in May. So it really, ideally, we would really want that plan signed off at this meeting, but they were unable to deliver that.
Look, I understand, and I've heard the Auditor General talk about this. There are major constraints on all auditors at the moment, and I understand that there will be a problem in getting the audit done on time, and also in really getting the resources mobilised to come to our audit rather than somebody else's, because there's such a huge amount of resource constraint. But I would like to, well, I hope that we would see a senior person from either the audit team or the OAG at every meeting. And perhaps we could just ask them to see if they could do that.
Yes,
we haven't got anybody here at the moment.
Yes, and Karen just asked today whether or not she could put that off until 2:30. What she did,
we'll do that.
What she did undertake in my telephone conversation with her was to kind of avoid the bumpy ride that we had last year, getting the audit complete. And of course, you know, your comments about shortages of auditors, you know, that's alive and well. But from our perspective, we really want the audit complete and the annual report adopted at the last council meeting this year, which is in late September. We don't want to, if at all possible, to have that run across an election period, which, you know, in the setup of a new council would mean quite a late adoption of the annual report. So that has been our bottom line that we have communicated with Karen, and I would expect to see that built into the audit plan. But I think in the auditor only time that you've got with her, or later on in this meeting when she gets here, you could have that conversation.
I mean, I understand all that, and there are 78 councils or however many there are in the country who face the same issue of wanting to get their audit complete by early September, or by September, early October.
Yes, and there's actually 10 councils that still haven't had their audits completed from last year.
Can I just suggest, for the purpose of the discussion, Roy, let's pick that one up. I'm happy for that conversation to run with Karen when she's here with us.
Yeah, okay.
Obviously, I think she should hear the conversation rather than us, in a sense, talking behind her back. Let's do that when she's here, and I'm very happy for you to put those questions to her. The purpose of this is to show, unfortunately, we're already behind time. I mean, to some extent, the timetable has been built around what should happen when it should happen. And that's particularly the case here, going back to Sean's reference to sort of the statutory or the needed purposes. So automatically, we have got a little red flag here about the external audit and statutory reporting, that we don't have a plan. We do know the backup, but let's get Karen to explain that to us when she's here and delivers her last year's management report. Okay, any other matters that people like to raise? I think, Diane, I see you've turned up. Thank you. Lovely to have you here. There being no further questions, can I just move us then to the recommendations, please, which is that we receive the information, we approve a 3-year forward work program. I guess that's within our competence to do, it definitely is. And that we note that if approved, well, I can assume it's approved, the subcommittee will have the opportunity to review the forward work program at each meeting to ensure it can be adapted to changes in our risk profile, which is great, and so that it remains relevant to the needs of the subcommittee. What that really means in my experience is that at the next meeting, we'll focus pretty hard on the meeting that follows, which would be probably key. I'm happy to move that. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Sean. Can we, is any discussion on the motion? There being none, can we please go to our reactions button? Green ticks for those that support the motion, red obviously if you don't.
That's carried.
Looks to me, thank you, Hayley, appreciate that. If we could then move to the next item, which is 2.3 strategic risk update. Oh, this is a brilliant paper. Kim, well done. This was made my day. Can we move to it, please, Kim, and I invite you and Richard to present your fulsome paper. It's tremendous. No, Kim, are you doing it, Richard?
Over to Kim.
Kim's there. I can see Kim's name.
Thank you. I hope you can see me now and hear me now.
I can hear you, Kim. I can't see you.
Okay, I have to do it all my end. Sorry. Here I go. Thank you, Chair. Kia ora tātou to the subcommittee members. I'll take the papers as read, but there's one thing I'd like to note, given that the papers were submitted a little while ago and has been some quite substantial work being done by ELT and with regards to COVID-19 and Omicron planning in particular. You may have noticed that the COVID-19 risk profile doesn't really include anything specific about special measures that we've put in place for Omicron. There has been some work there really around refreshing our business continuity planning or double checking it's really hitting the mark in terms of our priority and critical functions, and also making sure we do are able to maintain that capability for those critical functions, with particular regards to Omicron. So just to let you know that that is one of the risk profiles that will be updated in the near future, just to reflect some important work that's gone on there. But really, what I'm bringing to you today is our new strategic risk register, which is comprised of the summary dashboard and the 13 risk profiles. And what I'm asking from the committee is this level of detail and this breadth of information sufficient for you to perform your risk governance role, noting that there is quite substantial risk reporting going up through the other council committees, and we're providing you with that overview, and we can also pull in more detailed information when you like. So what we're asking really in the first recommendation is, do you approve this new framework? Are you happy with it? Is it performing the needs? Can we implement it? ELT is happy for us to implement it. Is the subcommittee happy? And secondly, the other thing we would like your feedback and your discussion on is really, and I think it's actually already come up a little bit from the previous papers, is are there particular priorities around our risks, particular risk topics, key consequence areas, or key threats you would like us to have more detailed conversation on? We do have the chief officers coming to specific meetings, but there's also ways we can bring in other subject matter experts to speak to specific topics if you're interested. So I'd really like to hear your feedback also on priorities for risk discussion that you might want us to facilitate for this meeting. So that's really the key things I'd like to ask you now. And I'd just like to, I guess, hand over to the chair to bring your feedback through and see what you've got to say on those. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. And again, very appreciative of the work. And also, hello, you already introduced the reality of risk management, which is that actually a lot's happened since you've prepared the paper around Omicron. And if we were in the perfect world, there'd be a whole bunch of information around that as well. So appreciate that. So look, members, there are two things in front of us that I think we need to do. One is firstly, let's address Kim's question. Is this helpful? You know, you're on board to try and understand the risk. I'm on board to try and understand the risks of the organisation. What's going to prevent us from achieving what we want to achieve? Does this hit the mark? Are we going to be able to monitor and manage off that? So it's a processy question. Is this going to serve us? Because if you go back to the previous item, the timetable, you're going to see this, at least the dashboard, at every meeting. The second thing is that Kim said is that actually parts of it can be uplifted and brought along, I would hope, by the risk owners, which are the people that we're going to see progressively across it. And Linda, again, going back to the previous meeting, you already hinted that actually infrastructure is probably in your mind risk, and I don't have a particular problem with that, and you'd like to see that brought forward. So again, that's going back to Kim's question to us, does this sort of seem right? But then the second part that we should also deal, seeing we're meeting today, is actually your comment questions about the risk generally, because they are risks that we are running at the moment. So it's valid to do that as well. So process-wise, are we happy? And then secondly, what do we think about the risk position that we're in at the moment? Because that's what this broadly affects, short of some of the immediate changes that have happened in the last 2 or 3 weeks. I'd open it up for comment and questions of Kim or Richard. No questions. Well, I believe it or not, Kim, I've got some, so let's go.
Sorry, Bruce.
Diane, g'day. How are you?
Sorry, but you go first. That's fine. I just thought I'd let you know I had my hand up. That was all.
Oh, right. Sorry, I didn't see that. Probably not looking closely enough at the screen and rather at my notes. Apologies for that. Why don't you go first, Diane? It's I've always got questions, so I'd rather give you the chance to get theirs out first.
Yeah. Look, this is a bit of a process question, but and I suppose with COVID being a known risk, it's probably almost an issue as opposed to a risk.
Yeah.
And how we best deal with that as a council, because this committee meets once every 3 months, and we know the impact of COVID. We just don't know what next month's going to bring us, just as an example. So I'm just I suppose it's the only risk is around this COVID, but then the flow on effect of COVID in terms of the increased risks on some of the other aspects because we can't get resourcing and various other things. So yeah, I really just would like an insight from Kim, whether you've got any suggestions.
As I understand it, you're asking how we address the things that are actually already issues, as well as the things that we're considering as future risks. Is that correct? Yeah, I guess that for the actual issues, and this is one area where I think we could grow in maturity as a council. We don't really differentiate that clearly, but generally what I would say is the immediate issues would go up through the relevant committees, such as the papers that went up around the resource and supply chain impacts and the measures we were putting in place that went up, I think, to your committee, Councillor Calvert, at the end of last year. So where something's quite immediate and already having an impact on the council, then it does get treated as an issue and then specific papers will go up. I think we could differentiate a little more clearly in the risk profiles, perhaps, if that would be helpful, to say partially this is already an issue in some respects, but really the risk paper does include that kind of worst case maximum credible scenario as well. So if this issue is not adequately managed, what does that mean in the big picture for the council? I'm not sure. Is that answer your question?
Yeah.
Perhaps, Kim, if I could just add a few things here. Obviously, your point about it being an actual issue and it's live. ELT has obviously got this firmly in its sights, and we have appointed one of the ELT members to be the lead on our response, so that we have a all of organisation response in place. And obviously we've got the opportunity to brief elected members, as we did the other day, yesterday. But where it's relevant to a particular committee, then we've got the opportunity to bring matters forward, whether there's financial implications or service implications, through the relevant committees. But we have got we're basically mobilised, and we have our business continuity plans activated. But Barbara, you may wish to add some things here.
Yes, through you, Chair. Stephen is right. We have been very active and focused on managing in what is quite an uncertain environment. And I would note one that we have now had to manage within for 2 years. And I'll talk about that later on when I have the opportunity to talk to you from a chief executive perspective. But we have certainly made sure that the business plans are in place for every business. We have taken a collective organisational view of what we call our priority one services, those services that must be delivered to our city in order to maintain its functionality, health and safety of people. Those services that are what we'd call support services priority two, but enable those priority one actions, and the third being those things that we should do because they are statutory or democratic imperatives and key strategic priorities for the city. And in doing this, ELT is also cognizant of the fact that we have people who are experiencing fatigue, and we don't put all of the load on one member of ELT. So we also, while we appoint a lead, we have backup. We talk about it regularly as a team, and we are closely monitoring the impact of the current environment on supply chain, on our contractors' capacity and capability to deliver, and on our own workforce's capacity and capability to deliver. And I think one of the most important things we can do is maintain really good open and honest dialogue with our governing body to ensure that there is good mutual understanding about what is possible, what is not, and on a no surprises basis, what we will do if, for example, a third of our workforce is unable to work. Look, we're all in an environment that is really unfamiliar to us, so it's something we just need to keep adapting and being flexible about, and communicating really clearly about, not only with our governing body but with our people and with our key contractor relationships.
And I just wonder whether some of that communication could potentially be in some form of writing. I don't mean to require a report, but just for example, like yesterday, I had a medical appointment, so I couldn't make the briefing, and yet there's no notes. So and I'm sure like even some members on this committee, not being elected members, will also, might get some, just sort of filling them in as well. So I just wonder whether there's an opportunity going forward to have
absolutely.
some of that articulated in writing.
Yes, we had a written presentation yesterday, which if we haven't already, we were circulating to the full council, and maybe I'll check that that's gone out. But it might be, yes, and in this ongoing environment, it might be appropriate at some point to do a full briefing for this committee on what we are doing.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Barbara.
You raised, by the way, a good systems question as well, Diane, which appreciate you doing. And I mean, I think this reflects the importance of this item on an ongoing basis, which is actually our role is, if you will, is to deal with risk. So really, in some sense, be at the top of the cliff, not the bottom, because actually you've got an issue, you're at the bottom of the cliff. So it raises the real importance that we are comfortable as a committee that the risks that Kim has put up here, and I do love the dashboard, and to be quite specific, we go to page 47 or 185, that is a very useful table. But the thing to do, I believe, as a committee for us is, do those represent the critical risks, number one? Because that's the first thing we should be worried about. Are these the key? And I like the external and the internal threats that, if we pay no attention to, will stop us from achieving what we want to achieve. Bearing in mind there'll be a whole lot more, but there's a limited focus. The second process thing we have to do around this risk is, and it's the hard work and it's the mahi of this committee, do the proposed or the implemented mitigations meet our view about what's tolerable? Because it's actually the critical thing, because we only, as you say, we only meet periodically, whereas Kim, you're quite right, with issues, ultimately, yes, we do want to know about those issues as a committee, but in reality, they're going to be real time on the whole. COVID's so real time, I get it. You're not going to route everything through this committee in terms of a response, otherwise we'd be meeting every day. And it raises a third thing about systems, which I would refer us to on the next page, page 48, which is the importance for us to have our attention on emergent risk. Because these are often things that really get traction and all of a sudden hit. And so consequently, our eyes should be on what is emerging as well, recognizing that sometimes emergent risk becomes an issue really, really fast. So, Kim, I put a lot of store in that, and any clarity and communication around emergent risk for a bit of feedback on process is really good. This is good, but if there's any ways in which we can add to that clarity, that's really good, because it's not always. I mean, the building consent liability risk that you've got there tends to be a slow burner. Albeit our actions today could be creating that slow burn further down the track. But then there are other things that could occur that, boom, could get us. So, Diana, a very good question, but I'm also trying to perhaps give you at least the Robertson view about actually how we should be looking at these documents, which, to get back to the questions you've raised, Kim, give me a really good view on actually the risks that we're running as an organisation. Again, probably somewhere down the track, Barbara, it's a bit like my question to Wendy. I'll be very keen to see how management work with this data and actually what they see, because to share that would be valuable with us as a committee, just as we should be open to sharing our views with you. Folk, are there any more questions folk would like to raise? Either comments about systems and process, which essentially is the question of Kim, or indeed about the risks that we're doing. And I want to bear in mind we will move into public excluded just briefly, because we've got a couple of risks here which quite rightly should be dealt with in public excluded when before we finish. So I will get to those. But again, open questions to people. Sean, and then Jenny.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. I wasn't going to raise it today because I'm not sure if Alison's around, but in the climate change section, the risks associated with mitigation and adaptation are kind of bundled together, but they're actually very, very different. And I'm not sure if you bundle them together, where it kind of muddies what the actual situation is. So the mitigation risk is really around reputation, moral hazard, and we want to be able to track where we are, you know, how we are progressing in our mitigation efforts, in order that we understand what that moral hazard looks like. Whereas adaptation, of course, is more about the seawalls and the south coast and so forth. So it's a very different type of risk and has a very different, resultant natural hazard. So I did wonder whether it would be more, I suppose, a better commentary if we split those two up rather than lump them together, because they are very different types of risk with very different outcomes and very different ways of ensuring or dare I say, mitigate them.
Okay. I guess with the threat itself, we've described it as inadequate response to climate change, and we really do have two prongs as a council. One is our mitigation and one is our adaptation, and they are laid out in Te Atakura first to zero. So really this is reflecting what we've committed to do as a council, and with regards to, I guess, the moral impact. I don't want to go into too much detail in each of the profiles today, but just to say that we do have things that we have committed to do in terms of things that we do measure as a council, and we do know how much influence we have in the whole of the city overall in terms of our carbon footprint. So this is around what does it mean if Wellington doesn't do what it says it will do, Wellington City Council. So we do have an influence through our mitigation as well as our adaptation, but I guess the way you can look at it is very similar to the earthquake risk. There's things we do to try and prevent damage from earthquakes or reduce the risk of the damage in terms of things like land use planning or building resilience, but we also have planning for response to earthquakes, and we play a really key role in that as well. So we wouldn't necessarily split up those two things, even though addressing very different parts of the risk. So if we split up all of these big threats into multiple things, we'd just have an endless list of threats, I guess. So it's kind of for pragmatic reasons that we're talking about. This is our response to climate change as a council. We have two prongs to it. We mitigate and we adapt. So we're bringing it together. What are the risks around that? Likewise with earthquake. This is our response to earthquake threats. We try and mitigate, but we also try and respond. So it's really, because it's the common problem that we're addressing, and B, it's we would just have a phenomenally long list of threats, I guess, or risks that we would have to develop profiles for, when really they are addressing the same threat, I suppose I'd say.
Thanks for that. And Sean, look, I have seen your email. Thank you for including me in that, and I'm sure it'll be given an appropriate response and consideration when, I think it's Alison, I don't know if Alison gets to it, so that'll be great.
All right, thanks.
Jenny, do you have a question, please, or a point to make?
Yes, thank you. To start with, I guess I was just looking at the risks on resource and supply shortage and inadequate planning and prioritisation. And I guess I really kind of see that they're very closely related. A lot of the mitigations for each are really closely related. So I'm kind of just being devil's advocate and saying, you know, do we actually think that these are two separate risks? I'm doing the opposite to Sean. Playing devil's advocate and saying, do we think that these are two separate risks, or is actually resource and supply shortage a subset of inadequate planning and prioritisation? What thought have we given to that?
Yes, I think there are a lot of similarities actually, and initially when we developed the long list, these were considered separately and endorsed as going forward separately, but I do agree there is a lot of similarities. I think we looked at the long list of what we had before in terms of, as a council, what our strategic risk register had outlined, and one was around the planning and prioritising. And we also looked at what other councils were doing, and some were doing the resource and supply. So we put them in there and we developed the profiles, and it may be down the track. We consider that we don't necessarily need the two if there really are that similar. Some things we might do that won't be around planning and prioritisation. I'm not really sure yet. I think we'll wait and see if things around the procurement and things like that are much more targeted to resource and supply, I suppose. But I guess the thing is with this framework that threats may come and they may go, and we can change them as appropriate and develop risk profiles for them as appropriate. If they do add to the conversation, if you're finding as a committee that there's actually no additional value or that there's a lot of repetition, then probably they're not really helping ELT with their decision making or conversations either. So this isn't set in stone, and I'm quite happy to adapt this to make sure that it does meet the needs in terms of if there is something that actually isn't adding to the richness of the conversation about risk.
Thanks, Kim. That's useful, and I'm quite comfortable to just, take it forward as it is, and we'll see how it goes. I guess the other thing is more of a reflection than a question, but I was looking at the financial planning and practice, inadequate financial planning and practice, and reflecting that it used to be, it used to contain something about financial sustainability of council, whereas it's now kind of been pulled back to really just a systems and processes view rather than a view about whether we have the financial sustainability to meet our infrastructure and other demands. I guess I will start with a question, which is, can you talk about why you've made that decision to kind of pull back from a broader look of do we think we're financially sustainable to meet our things down to more of our financial processes? But the second thing is, I guess I've been reflecting on what do I mean by financial sustainability? Why did I think that was important when it was in the list before? And I think it really comes back to this idea about coming back to three waters and that we've been underinvesting for a long time without really knowing that we were underinvesting in our assets, and this concern that we may be inadvertently not financially sustainable. So it's possible that I think that my concern there might be picked up by Roy's suggestion, which was around inadequate asset management, because I actually think most of my concerns around financial sustainability are actually around, are we doing a good job of stewarding our assets? Are we investing in them enough to make sure that we're not running them down for future generations? So there's kind of a question there, and then there was kind of a thought and a suggestion.
I was just going to, sorry, Kim, I was just going to say that that risk definition shifted after the council adopted its LTP, because you might remember at the time there was a lot of kind of discussion, debate about our financial sustainability before the council resolved to do certain things through the LTP. So my recollection is, I'm not saying that all those sustainability issues are sorted, but we're a lot more kind of firm and sure about things as a result of the adoption of the LTP. But it's a judgment call in the end as to have we kind of got financial decisions made around let's get Wellington moving. Well, no, the question is not, but Sarah will tell you that we've provided headroom to deal with that. So Sarah's online, she might wish to just jump in as well, but I think it was a point in time when we last defined that risk, and it was, there was a lot of discussion at the elected member level through our workshops, but if Sarah's online, she could perhaps jump in as well.
You've covered that pretty well, Stephen, unless there's any other specific questions members have for me.
Does that mean, Jenny, that in terms of the very helpful discussion, which I broadly agree with, that you put in here, Kim, at paragraph 12, you're effectively saying, Jenny, that you would feel comfortable to encourage Kim to investigate the idea of inadequate asset management?
Yeah, I guess I'm just reflecting as well on, thank you for those answers, and I appreciate that. And I definitely agree that this council has made decisions that have put us on a more sustainable financial trajectory. But I also don't think that removes the risk, because we're in an election year and the next council might make different decisions. And I reflect very much on the situation in Tauranga, where one of the reasons that the council ended up being replaced was because they were essentially refusing to invest in infrastructure that was needed. So I guess that's kind of where I come back to the asset, inadequate asset management planning. And I think that if we did explore that might capture that concern about financial sustainability going forward. So yes.
Yes, great. Kim, I suspect we've got a nod from me as well, and I don't know about the rest of the committee, but I think that might be one that we would encourage to do it. I mean, I think the interesting thing here, isn't it, is that actually you quite rightly have linked a couple of these risks, and often they are, and it just depends on the perspective they come from. Jenny, I quite like the distinction between resources and supply, because probably predominantly it is an external risk to us, whereas internal planning and prioritisation is almost inevitably down to us and our own practice. So, albeit they are linked. You can't, it would be unwise to look at one without looking at the other. So I like the distinction as it stands. Okay, I wonder what I'd like to do is we do have two individual risks which form part of the total risk dashboard that are for PX. So what I'd like to do is to move into PX so that we could consider those, receive any comments, then move back out, and then we look at the recommendations to finalise and round that out for Kim, because she's asked for our advice. If folk are happy with that process, Heidi, I hope I'm doing this right. I'd like, because I have got somewhere here my driving notes.
That's 100% right, Bruce.
Yes, thank you. I would like to move that we go into public excluded, and it's to consider attachment 14, which is the cyber attack strategic risk profile, and attachment 15, which is malicious attack strategic risk profile, for the reasons you can see on the screen. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Linda. So if you go to your reactions button, please, all those in favour, please use your green tick. Those against, the red cross. Thank you. Righty. Are we there, Heidi? I think we are. No, sure.
Yes. Yep, Councillor Wright has just voted, so that has carried.
Yes, thank you.
If you give us a couple of seconds just to turn the live stream off, that would be great.
Right, thank you. Right. Heidi, I take it we're ready to go again once we get a few folk back.
Yes, we are just getting people to turn their videos on now.
Thanks, Heidi. Appreciate that. Oh, you've lost somebody there, Stephen. Right, thank you, everybody. Roy, are you there, Roy? Yes, he is. Well done. I think we're running okay. Andy had to pop out. Brilliant.
We do have a quorum, and I think Linda is there. She just doesn't have a video on.
Oh, right. Okay, cool. Okay, well, so thank you for keeping me moderately safe in terms of process, Heidi. Having considered everything, I would like us to move them back to really the requests or the recommendations. Firstly, we received the information. Second, this is on page 39. We received the information that we approve the implementation of the revised risk management reporting framework. So this is particularly, if I picked it up correctly, Kim, the full package as you have it here in the information that it would contain. That's effectively the changed risk management reporting framework, correct?
Correct, the dashboard and the profiles. And we're happy to bring the profiles, the full profiles every time if that's what the committee wants.
Well, I think, isn't that then part of your number 3 recommendation, which if I was to go to paragraph 13, is that you would send us the summary at each meeting, that we would receive the individualised risk profiles if they've been significantly updated, and you've got a reference to what that might mean. The risk is rated as extreme or high, so presumably it's a new risk rating, and the threat or risks is particularly relevant to the chief officer and lieutenants as per the 3-year meeting schedule. I think probably we'd say whenever they come, please bring the ones they're responsible for, regardless, I would say. And the subcommittee requests a specific update on a particular threat or its associated risks, which would make sense to me as well. So that's what I presume they're doing. Dashboard plus those would give rise to what would come dashboard plus profiles if people are there. Jenny, you got a point to make?
Yep, thanks. I was just wondering whether we might want to add a 4 or something that says that we request staff will go away and look at adding inadequate asset management as one of the risks.
Yes, thank you for that. I think that would be good. I think the feeling of the meeting, I suspect, will support that. So essentially, we would have a 4th recommendation, Heidi, that we request Kim investigates the risks associated with inadequate asset management and its integration with our reporting framework. So that leaves you open, Kim, if you look at it and you think it's covered elsewhere or in some way, you've heard the broad concerns we have. You may want to say, well, actually, I think it should be dealt with this way, but at the very least, we've looked at it. Thank you.
No, I think it's a very good point, and I think it would be a welcome addition to the information that we have.
Good. So I think that we've now fashioned up 4 resolutions. We receive, we approve the framework, we agree the priorities as detailed in paragraph 13. I don't presume we have to repeat those here for the actual recommendation, and that we request that staff investigate the risks associated with inadequate asset management. Thank you, Heidi, that's really good, and its integration within the reporting framework. This feels like a pretty good set of recommendations. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Jenny. So if we go to our reactions column, please. Green tick to support, red cross if you don't. I'm just checking there. Thank you. I think that's everybody voted. Roy, are you
Roy,
voting?
yes.
You're abstaining. Do we have an abstention button? I don't know. Oh, you're voting. There we go. Heidi, I hope that's all good for you.
Yes, that's all good. And just a note, you cannot abstain unless you are not in the meeting.
Right. Kim, I sense we haven't done justice to the papers you've prepared. It's something which I often think about risk officers. It takes a lot of effort And while I hope we've had a substantial discussion, I always feel like we never can, in some ways, do it justice. So I hope as we live with this hard work and the work you'll continue to do, we meet with some of your colleagues that are the risk office or the risk owners, that this will become more alive for us. So you've created a tremendous base, and well, actually, let me reflect. This is as good as I've seen elsewhere from around the country. And that was one of my challenges to Barbara last year. So if I can just say to you personally, thank you. I sense a lot of your dedication and hard work in here. I feel a wee bit like we haven't quite done it just, I think we have, but it might not appear that way. It's going to be so live for us as we go forward as a committee. Thank you for your work. And I say that as good as anything else that I've seen from around the country. So thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm aware that it's chunky.
Righty, so then can we move? We better keep ourselves moving. I'm conscious of everybody's time. We can move to 2.4, please. Assurance and business integrity update. Phyllis, I saw your face there somewhere. Thank you, Phyllis. If you lead us through this, please, that would be great. Thank you, Phyllis.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thanks, Bruce, and Happy New Year, everyone. It's actually the second day of Chinese New Year, so it's actually very timely. So Happy New Year, one and all. So just in terms of this paper, it's pretty much, there are 4 distinct parts to this paper. So the first bit is about progress against the assurance work program that this committee approved in June last year. The second part of this paper addresses management's progress to address open audit recommendations, both internal audit as well as other independent assurance. Third part of this paper talks about protected disclosure and fraud update. And the fourth part of this paper provides the committee with information about the elected members' gift declaration. So if I could just highlight a bit on the first part of the paper, which is an update on the assurance work program, I'm asking this committee to approve or endorse and approve a couple of changes that a couple of additions that we've made to the work program itself. One, we have done it, so I hope you approve it. And the second one is at the early stages of planning. So one was we did a bit of work around the world of wearable arts, just to verify the claim that came true. And the second addition to the work program was looking at how we respond to issues that have been identified within the Evans Bay Parade Cycleway. So both of these requests by management, and we're considering them as part of our audit work program. If you can recall, we have a 5% time set aside for responsive reviews for things that management would like us to do. And these are the 2 that I'm proposing that will be included in our work plan. Other than that, pretty much not too much to bring to the attention of the committee. Most things are in progress. If I could take these papers as read, I'm happy to answer any questions to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Sorry, there, Phyllis, I was just getting a couple of texts about the meeting, which was very helpful. Appreciate that. Do we have questions or comments for Phyllis, please? We don't? Again, I think there's a risk here that just good hard yards, it's being done, and it's great to see it being done. Phyllis, I do appreciate that you're looking for retrospective approval, and I don't actually have any trouble with that. Things like your World of Wearable Arts funding request is one of those sorts of things that it made a lot of sense to me when I read it, that probably through your office, Barbara, you would be pulled in to look at that, and it makes a lot of sense from my perspective, and certainly has my support. Folk, just while I've spoken, is there any other questions that folk would like to raise? I've got to just ask Phyllis one question then on page 81. Again, just trying to look through completing things, speed to action, I guess, and all those things. And I'm sure there are good reasons. We've got a main 2019 report still with open items, 2 of them. but one is of high, let alone the other one being medium importance. Just wonder if you could comment, what will it take, particularly in the area of procurement and contract management, which should be bread and butter for us. What's it going to take to get rid of these?
So the attachment has a bit more information about all 4 of these high-risk items, and yes, procurement is one of them. In fact, all 4 of these items are actually linked in some way or another to some of the strategic risks that we are managing. You would see, I think, within that paper, we've talked about procurement, yes, and that's about oversight of our significant services. And supplier, as you know, supplier risk is one of the areas that we are trying to manage as well. In terms of what it take to close them, I think I do know that there is work going on in the finance space, and maybe the CFO can jump in here at some point to talk a little bit more about that. But I'm quite satisfied that we are actually progressing. There's been a lot of work going through in terms of reorganization and in the finance space, and working through what is it that we need to do from an end-to-end perspective. We have, I know, updated the procurement policy, but there's still a bit more work to do in the organization around pushing through some of those processes across the organization. So that's still to be embedded. And I think we are looking at how we look at contract management framework as a whole as well. So there's quite a few things within that space around procurement that we thought it would be good to keep open for a while, just to keep an eye around how we are progressing on that. As for the others, they are quite recent, but they're all also current and in progress. And again, all very much relevant to things that are happening now to improve the maturity of our organization's internal control environment.
Thank you. And look, you're quite right. I should have looked at the attachment, which I had done, but for some reason hadn't made the connection in my notes, Phyllis. So thank you for that. But it did make me, and I'm sure I'm right, even when I read it out loud to myself, purchase to pay processes. It says purchase to pay processes should be easy to avoid and hard to enforce. That sounds like the sort of system that I'd like, but I don't think we quite mean that, do we? Or do we really mean that? It's easy to avoid and hard to enforce?
Context. Context is always key.
Easy to enforce and hard to avoid. But anyway, like that's something that you can look through and tell me something.
The way our systems is we are trying to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of our procurement system. So sometimes it can be quite hard to ensure good procurement practices.
Right.
And we are quite reliant on managers doing the right thing, and by and large we are. But what this does mean that we are reliant at each point we make a procurement for people to do the right thing and have the right processes and think of the right things. If we come across turnover, new managers, people who are less familiar with the right thing to do, that's where sometimes the system might not work as well, because in my view, we are very much reliant on people knowing what to do and doing the right thing. And I would say by and large, we are. So part of that is to improve how we, whether it is through reporting or more monitoring, how we actually make it easier for our people to do the right thing. So I'll stop there.
Thanks for that, Phyllis. I think Jenny, then Roy.
Thank you. I've got first one minor point, which is I was looking at the elected member gift register and seeing that we didn't have 100% compliance, and just wanted to suggest that I think possibly I'm one of the people who didn't respond because I didn't have anything to say. So if at the next request, possibly we could just remind or encourage councillors to provide an actual active nil response, because I think that might be one of the reasons we don't have a full suite there.
Yep, we will do that through the elected member support team. Yes, Jenny, I wasn't going to point out, but yes, you're one of the one who had not put in your declaration. But yes.
Well, it's because I have to get around. I will file an official nil report. This is my unofficial report. My other question was about the Evans Bay Cycleway and just why the ELT have requested that you look into and review that particular project. Apologies if you've answered that already. I had a dog barking while you were talking, so I might have missed it.
This is, I guess, it's just a sense check. In some ways, it is. I think there has been some noise around how we manage some of the issues and customer or public complaints that come through. And this is just them wanting to make sure that we have as good a process as possible. So, which is, I think, is a good thing. And yeah, so that's essentially it. They're just requesting that that there's no current incident or issues, as far as I understand, has been resolved. But as part of that ongoing learning thing, what they've asked for is maybe an independent point of view come in to have a look at what they've done and whether there can be any improvements made to the processes. So yeah, that's the main driver.
Thank you, Jenny. Roy.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. I just wanted to echo your comments about this paper. I think it's very good. A number of papers like this tend to go into too much detail or not enough detail, and maybe this one's got it just about right. And I like the coverage. There seemed to be a fair amount of coverage for a relatively small department, which always leaves me the question, Richard, do you think you've got enough people?
Yes, Roy, we have enough people for the work programme that was approved this year. There's always staff that come in and out of the team. We have other means of performing the audits that are remaining for this year. So I think the question that we fired back last time was how much assurance does this subcommittee need? And based on what you've asked us to do, we can provide it.
Well, you'll find me asking the question at the next meeting and the one after as well. So be prepared. But no, it's good. It looks good. I like the way it's done, and I think with that you've got reasonable coverage and some good results. Keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you for those words, Roy, and well done, Foss and Richard. Can I move us then, please, to the recommendations here on page 79 of the agenda? And thanks, Hayley. We receive the update. We agree to the addition of the 2 responsive reviews, which we've talked about, both of them. We receive management's progress on the recommendations. We receive information about the integrity activities. And we received the statement on completeness of the quarterly update, which, Jenny, thank you, is already out of date by 1, so well done. I'll move that from the chair. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Linda. I see your hand there. I'll put the motion, or any discussion on the motion? There being none. Put the motion. All those in favour, please green tick. Those against, red tick, or red cross. Brilliant. Looks like the motion's carried. Have you got a copy of that there, Hayley?
Yep, we've got that. Thank you.
Brilliant. So if we could then move to item 2.5, please. I guess now that we're a month into the year, you'll say Christmas is coming, won't we? It's only 11 months away, and this is a very similar paper saying that long-term plan's not too far away. So Jeffrey, who I hadn't met, Jeffrey Coe, and Baz, I think you guys are on to take us through this, please.
Kia ora all. Yes, for those who haven't met me, I'm Jeffrey Coe. I'm the Principal Advisor in the Corporate Planning team. So I've got a bit of a role in coordinating planning, including bringing together the LTP. So I thought, I won't talk to the whole paper, but I thought I'd just give a bit of an overview about what we're trying to achieve with the 3-year program of work and where we're at. So I guess overall what we're trying to achieve for the 2024 LTP is just a more comprehensive long-term planning exercise. The current long-term plan notes a number of significant issues on the horizon that required further work. So things like city housing sustainability, Let's Get Wellington Moving, 3 Waters, and also the investment and growth following planning for growth. And so what we're trying to do with the program of work is ensure a program that maps out a path for understanding those issues and then enabling decisions to be taken on them for the next LTP. And I think a particular key focus will be around growth. So making sure the decisions that were taken around the spatial plan in terms of how the city will grow can flow through into the infrastructure investments required to support that growth. They're complex issues, and I guess we're trying to ensure a process where we have time enough to do the work and develop the options for dealing with them in 2024. I think the other point around what we're trying to achieve is also supporting a more strategic planning exercise. We're trying to design a process that better supports selected members and the community to tackle the strategic parts of establishing a long-term plan alongside the budgets and the projects which are focused. So at the moment, the processes are a bit overlapping and with a bit of an emphasis possibly on the strategic, on the detail rather than the strategic. And progressing some of those big issues I mentioned before will, we think, challenge some of the council's financial and infrastructure strategic settings. And so we want to have a process that better steps elected members, but also the community through those strategic issues, allow choices to be made, and eventually also get into the detail that you need to get into for the long-term plan around the budgets of the projects and the rates. So in terms of where we're at with the program, we talked in the paper around setting up a steering group. So the program and the steering group are currently getting clarity on the scope of the different pieces of work in the program and their dependencies. And so it's about building some clarity within each of the pieces of work of the long-term plan timeframes as a whole, how they fit in and what the required inputs will be. The steering group's also at the moment satisfying themselves of the management structures for each of the individual pieces of work, whether they've got an appropriate level of discipline around project management and governance for the different pieces of work. And also just getting clear around where the risks lie across the program of work so they can have an informed understanding of where they need to focus their attention for overseeing the work. And then once we have that, we'll have a critical path mapped out. We'll be clear on the dependencies and an informed understanding of risk. And then the steering group will be in a position to, I suppose, monitor against that program level plan and track for any variances or issues that come up. So that's, I suppose, what I was a brief overview of what we're trying to achieve and where it's at. But happy to take any questions.
Brilliant. And the attached presentation was one that I think members already have. Is that right, Jeffrey? They've seen that before.
Yes, so we'd talk to a workshop of the annual plan, long-term plan committee and run through that.
Made a lot of sense, which is great. I saw Iona, I think your hand first, then Jenny.
Thanks very much, Bruce, and thank you, Jeffrey. I think congratulations to the team for taking a more rigorous approach to all the planning and a more integrated approach. I think that will really help. My big issue really is about whether we're rigorous enough. So I think you'll know that we were told in 2018 that we were giving water a big boost, right? And I was like, oh, that's good, because it's hard to get water, any money from the organisation. And yet it wasn't enough. So I guess, are people going to have enough freedom within the organisation to be able to speak up and say, actually, this is what is needed? And also, what have you learned really from looking at a big area like that and kind of realising that we did underspend?
I suppose some of those improvements around asset management disciplines, which we're trying to put in place, should do that. And the point of the LTP program should be to raise the investment requirements across council, what is required to fund growth in terms of, and also manage our assets. Certainly intend for the piece of work to transparently lay out those investment needs, but then also work through a decision-making process where those needs can be balanced, prioritized as needed based on any affordability or other constraints that there may be. I think that's one of the key things that we do want to do, is make sure that we have a process where that doesn't just lay out the investment needs and the challenge, but also is done in time enough to present the options for what we can do about it. So how can we fund these things if there's challenges in funding, and actually provide some options for dealing with the issues rather than just laying the issues out.
Perhaps, Jeffrey, sorry, Councillor Pennant, I was just going to add that in that year one, laying the groundwork in that graphic, obviously asset management planning is a key focus, and that is a priority of our Chief Infrastructure Officer. And it really needs to be evidence-based and data-led in terms of great or good, at least good to great foundations for those asset management plans. So, just to your earlier point about the organisation being able to put their hand up for, identifying areas that perhaps require further investment, we really want to make that, grounded in evidence and, the condition assessment, for example, that leads to an appropriate asset management plan. And you'll remember that that was an area of the of Audit New Zealand, and particularly around our three waters, in terms of the level of confidence in the condition of those assets. And obviously there's a program to address that. But equally, we are looking at making sure that we've got a good base standard of all our asset management plans across our organisation, and that's very much the emphasis in this early phase of our LTP, so that we're not kind of scrambling at the end to have our asset management plans kind of come after the infrastructure strategy, or without context around the decision making that councils will have to make going into the LTP.
So just one further question. I guess I would have thought we are looking at billions of dollars, like Let's Get Wellington Moving, for example, has not been grappled with yet about how we're actually going to fund it. So I guess I'm just looking for some reassurance that officers know this isn't business as usual, and that we're going to work really hard, and we're going to need more funding tools, because there's no way that rates is going to pay for all of this.
Can I just make a comment there through you, Chair? I think that is fundamentally a responsibility that we hold jointly with governance, and what we have to make sure we do is have a good process together to ensure that we highlight the issues and the challenges. That as Stephen has said, that the issues we bring forward to you are underpinned by clear evidence and data. As much as you can ever have that clarity, it's very easy to look back in time and be very wise after the event, but to understand that at any point in time there won't be a perfect view. And I think you'll know that officers have repeatedly raised these kinds of issues with the governance body, and I feel certain that transparent process of conversation between us will continue to be the basis for our planning for the future of the city.
Thanks, Iona. Jenny, you've got a query.
Yeah, thank you. First thing was on page 96 on paragraph 20, it lists off a number of new roles and reorganisation that's happening. And my first question is just, have all these roles been filled? Is this team kind of, are we at, do we have everybody on board that we need to be on board for this?
My understanding is that it's probably a mix. I think largely, yes, new roles are on board. I know that in the planning and environment team, that we've got the new funding and growth principal advisor in on board, and in our corporate planning team, we've got extra resource in there to support some of those underlying base building up of planning maturities. I think in other spaces, there's still a work in progress to bring them on.
I'm just reading between the lines that in other places probably means finance from the list that I was looking at. Is that correct? I don't know if Sarah Hayes here.
She is there. I'm not sure if she's online. I'm just not in position to talk to it.
Sorry, Jeffrey, if I can speak to this one. I'm sort of the new manager of financial policy and planning. And so, Councillor, yes, I am still recruiting. I have a small team to assist with this, and currently looking at the whole team. So we have a new starter beginning on 14th of February, and I'm still recruiting for a couple of roles that'll help us get there.
That's great. Thanks, Richard. I guess it would be great to understand kind of what our kind of risk management plan is if we're struggling to fill those roles, because I know that professional services more generally, but finance in particular, are becoming hard to recruit. So it would be good to understand kind of what our plan is if we're having trouble filling those roles.
Well, we're still going through a bit of a recruitment process. We have been trying for since before Christmas. So it is very much something that Sarah and myself will be taking care of. And look, we hope to have that filled within a short space of time.
If we've only been trying since before Christmas, I'm less worried. It's not like we've been trying for 6 months and haven't been able to fill them yet.
Not yet.
So my follow-up question is about, we're now 6 months into this 3-year work program. How well have we delivered on the first 6 months of this work program? Are we on track?
Like I say, we're at a stage where we're still, I suppose, understanding the moving parts, so getting really clear around the scope of the different pieces of work and mapping out the dependencies. So some pieces of work certainly are well underway. I know that, for example, the growth studies around Wellington Water in terms of the investment we needed in water as a consequence of the spatial plan, they've got a program team on board, and they're starting that work on that now. Others are probably in different places. So they're in a variety of spaces, the different pieces of work. It's not all of the LTP program of work was commissioning a bunch of new work. Some of it is about coordinating existing work. So for example, the Let's Get Wellington Moving piece of work is an ongoing piece of work, which we need to coordinate into the program rather than start and commission as part of this piece of work. And you're on mute, Councillor.
Thank you. Question on the slides on page 105, the slides about strategic activity planning. And I guess just to start from a very baseline level, what is strategic activity planning and why is it, or how is it different to how we've been doing things up until now, and why is it going to be so much better?
So strategic activity management planning is trying to have an understanding of each of the activities of council. So at the moment, a lot of the planning probably hasn't been as, I suppose, comprehensive in terms of looking at each of the activities of council, looking ahead as to where those activities are going, what are the strategic influences on them, and how might they need to change in the future? Are we well positioned for what the future demand from those services might be, and also the way in which how those services changes in terms of how they might be funded, or what other challenges there are. And we also probably don't have as comprehensive structural understanding of the services we provide, what levels of service we provide, and how they contribute to outcomes. So it's about putting the structures in place. The planning we do around our different activities is sometimes responding to particular issues or known issues that are coming up, but it's about having the structural building blocks of understanding the activities of council, where they're currently at, what levels of service we currently provide, and what options there are for how we might provide them. It'll enable us to more easily respond to issues, to know what the levers are that we can pull in terms of responding to particular issues, what options we have in different activities around services, and understanding, having a better understanding, looking further out around what are the future issues that may come on this activity, so we can start to do the work to plan for those and build options around them rather than react to those issues when they hit us. Does that help?
Perhaps just to add another point, it provides context for our asset management plans, so that often, we're planning, making decisions about our assets, but without the context of where the service is going. So, one of the questions might be, well, do we even need that asset if the service can be delivered in a different way? So it's really giving that strategic direction to that asset management context as well.
I would see this, Jenny, this particular slide is a very important input to that risk debate we had around priority and planning. how could we prioritise if we don't do it in the strategic way that Jeffrey's outlined? That is a very important page.
Yeah. And then finally, my last question is just about asset management planning. So thank you for the segue, Stephen. And that's obviously somewhere where we want to try and raise our game and raise our performance. And the areas that I'm most concerned about in that are actually in kind of the park, sport and rec and more of the community space. So I'm just aware that we've got and we've got 2 items on the agenda for this week, Kandala Pool and the Newtown Workingmen's Bowling Club. But I'm aware that Park, Sport and Rec have received, a lot of these sports clubs or other clubs that are struggling to maintain their own assets. When they struggle, they turn to council and they say, oh, here, council, we're going to give you this building because we can't pay for it anymore. But the gift often is not in very good condition. And so one of the things that I'm worried about as kind of potentially a hidden liability that's sitting there is how many of these, gifted buildings or buildings that are really at the very end of their life are sitting in our Park, Sport and Rec portfolio. So what work do we have in train? How well are we doing to raise the asset management planning in Park, Sport and Rec and particularly get a handle on that issue?
Jenny, perhaps I can answer that because you'll see it actually in the forward agenda, the community facilities review, and it's actually as part of the foundational work leading into the next LTP. So that is an opportunity to basically have a strategic view about all of our community facilities across the city, and not only just ours, but other providers, and take a look at that. I think the question about our asset plans for our council-owned facilities, that is something that does need work and is part of our work program. As to this question of would we inherit a gift of an asset from another provider, I mean, that probably is part of a due diligence test in terms of would we really want to take that on and add to our asset base. But the community facilities review is a really important part of getting ready for the next LTP.
Yeah, I was thinking more about things that we've been gifted in the past rather than whether we might accept gifts in the future. But I'm just aware in Tawa, for example, there's I think it's an old Scout Hall building that was near the end of its useful life that at some point in the past was gifted to Park, Sport and Rec. And I just wonder how many of those, I know about this one in Tawa, how many of those are out there. So that'll be something that'll be great to see the work going forward on. Thanks, Stephen.
Diane, you've got your hand up, please.
Yes, thank you. And sorry, Jenny, but when I heard you mention Kandala Pool, I thought I'd better just nip in there and just confirm from officers' knowledge that I don't believe Kandala Pool was sort of gifted. I think it was part of council, and if it wasn't part of city council, it was part of the Onslow Borough Council, from memory. But you may not be able to answer me on that one.
Could I just suggest we having a wide-ranging discussion here, but I don't.
No, that's all right.
I don't think the planning is overly affected by how the Kandala Pool came into.
I'm happy to withdraw that one, Diane.
To be honest.
Oh, thank you. I think it was a council asset. That's okay.
It's a bit
sensitive at the moment, Bruce. I appreciate your comments.
I didn't mean to imply that Kandala Pool was one of the things that had been gifted. So apologies.
That's all right. Thank you.
So look, I wonder if I could start perhaps just trying to draw this to conclusion, because actually, Jeffrey, you can see it's engendered a lot of discussion. I think that's really good. So I'd just like to perhaps conclude with a couple of comments from me, if that's okay. Firstly, if your committee could have as a terms of reference, I would really like you to live by paragraph 17. In paragraph 17 of your report says simply, we are determined, more or less my reading, to make this a strategic decision-making exercise, not an exercise in compliance. And I know that we've got our colleagues from Audit New Zealand here. I think that would be music to their ears to hear that as well. This is not a compliance exercise. This has to have its value in driving strategy. So, Stephen, if you're on that committee, that should be the mantra at the top of it, number one. Number two, there is a sense to which, why are we interested in this? And I think that's a fair question from an audit and risk perspective. And it is because actually you are starting through this process, you're starting to form and hit a number of key points, Jeffrey, for us, which are really important. Our statutory compliance. It's a concern, do we comply with the law? I hadn't just said about compliance. Here I am going straight to that area. It is actually about forming a critical external accountability document that is the preserve, obviously, of this committee to at least help council get to the starting gates on before they do the policy decisions as far as that's concerned. So I would hope out of this that we do get some form of update, not so that there are policy decisions that we drive, because that's not our role, but that we can understand, and I think you've said it before, Jenny, what are some of the risks, what are the project risks around this critical planning exercise not succeeding? Because again, we know we've got an objective to hit, which needs to be of the right strategic quality come 2024. The only other question that I had was I did look at the terms of reference, and I was just wondering if there's some code in here. If I look at the first sentence, the purpose is to ensure coordinated dependency management of key pieces of work that will lead to amendment of the 2131 LTP. And I thought this was all about the 2434 LTP. I just wonder whether there is are we planning an amendment, number one? Number two, I wonder whether that was actually the right purpose as far as that was concerned. So I'll leave that as a point for you to play with when it comes to the draft terms being considered by somebody else. Right, can we move to the resolutions, please, Heidi, which I think is pretty simple. If I recall rightly, it's, where are we? Yes, it is to receive the information. Jeffrey, thank you for that. I'm going to move that we receive the information. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Roy. Again, any comments or debate on the motion? There being none, can I ask you, please, green ticks to approve, red cross if you're not. Brilliant. Thank you for that. Thanks, Heidi. Appreciate that. Thank you, Jeffrey, for that, and the rest of your team behind you. I suspect it's been important in getting this here for us. So thank you for that. Well, we move to 2.6, I hope we have our team from Audit New Zealand here. Oh yeah, it's Karen. G'day, Karen. I can see the top half of your face, by the way. There we are. You can see the whole lot.
Is that better? Hi, Bruce.
Karen, you're welcome along, and I appreciate you being busy elsewhere. When will it not be a busy year, Karen? So look, thank you for making time. So look, and fair warning, we'd love to hear about the report that you've got in front of us, and obviously I would like to invite you to speak to that after. I guess I should really let Richard have first go. But just looking for you, we just want to check on the development of the arrangements for the current or the coming audit, the 21-22 audit, and just have a quick chat to you about that as we go on as well too, please. So in good process, welcome to you and your team. I think you've got one or two of your members here. You may introduce them in a couple of moments, but Richard, I wonder if there's any particular opening comments from staff you'd like to make, please.
Really, thank you, Bruce. Probably the only comments I would make is that this is a standard annual process. I'm just thinking of any viewers that may be watching this. This is not a out of the ordinary process. At the end of every yearly audit, Audit New Zealand kindly put together what we call a management report or a governance report, where they highlight some recommendations which they think will help strengthen the internal controls of the organisation. They put down some recommendations. Management is given the opportunity to respond to that, and there's a bit of a general discussion between us, and then we finalise the report. I guess a couple of things I would like to just point out is that audit's finding is that the council's control environment continues to operate effectively. So obviously for the Audit and Risk Committee, that's a pretty important thing to note. We did get what's called an unmodified audit opinion was issued on the financial statements. And so that means that audit was very satisfied with that we presented fairly the City Council's activities and the numbers effectively, or the financial numbers, and we had a qualified opinion related to just a couple of the performance information around the water supply, wastewater and stormwater. And it's actually a couple of improvements in that regard from the previous year. But I'm happy to take the report as read and happy to answer any questions that they may have of management, or I'll pass any other questions over to Karen that you might have as well.
Thank you, Richard. And look, before I open up, Karen, I'd like to invite you to talk to your report. And as I say, if I did see before, we might have one or two of your members here. So please, if you're welcome, you could introduce them as well.
Okay. Thank you very much for those opening comments, Richard, and thank you, Bruce. I have brought along Nicole Stevens with me. Nicole Stevens is the Associate Director in our Specialist Audit Assurance Services team. I've brought her along because the last couple of years we've had her look closely at procurement, project management and contract management at the council. I mean, as you know, this is a very important area, especially with big capital projects and some challenging ones. So once I kind of go through the form of our report that we've issued, I'd like to invite Nicole to talk about the findings from this work, both in the last couple of years, really. I think that will provide good context for the work that we have done, and also some work in this area which will be ongoing in future years. So first of all, we did issue a non-standard audit report on the 28th of October. The audit report included a modified opinion on financial statements, so we were satisfied that financial statements fairly reflected the council's activity and financial position for the year. We issued a qualified opinion on two performance measures. Those two performance measures were maintenance of the reticulation network, in other words, water supply, water loss. And the other one was the total number of complaints for the three waters. We also qualified prior year comparators for those two measures and two other measures which for which the issues were resolved this year. We included an emphasis of matter paragraph drawing the reader's attention to the disclosure in the annual report, which outlines that subsequent to year-end, the government announced that it would introduce legislation to establish 4 publicly owned water entities to take over the responsibilities for the service delivery and infrastructure from local government on the 1st of July 2024. We found overall that the council's control environment for both the financials and non-financial performance was effective, and we're able to rely on controls for the purpose of the audit where it was more effective to do so. At the commencement of the financial year, we identified some areas of focus which formed some of the key matters in the report. But we also, because it was an LTP year, we also picked up some risks arising from the LTP audit, which we carried forward to the year-end audit as well. An example of that is the condition of 3 water assets and the implications on that for the fair value assessment of infrastructural assets. We also took into account right up to the date we signed the audit opinion, recent developments in the sector. And of course, that included the government's announcement to introduce legislation to establish the 4 publicly owned water entities. But we also looked at how the council accounted for the water stimulus funding and whether that was appropriate. I guess if I was to kind of summarize the audit, there were a number of areas which required significant management judgment. So we looked at the robustness of that judgment, the documentation, the assumptions that management has set out. I think overall management did a really good job of these areas. They were rather challenging, and it was well prepared for the audit. The financial statements and performance information and other information in the annual report was of a good quality. It was much better than we felt then in previous years. I think the later audit meant that management certainly had more time to prepare the annual report, and it adopted good QA and review processes, which also, the committee and working groups were involved in as well. So we're very appreciative of all of the help and support we received during the audit. I'd like to hand over to Nicole to talk about procurement, project management and contract management, and we'll of course be very happy to answer any questions you may have, and to, as Bruce forewarned us about, talked about where we're at with our audit plan and when can you expect to our audit plan for 2021-22, and when can you expect to see that plan from us.
Thanks, Karen. Do appreciate that. Nicole, welcome to the meeting. Forward to your views.
Kia ora, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Bruce, for that welcome. I thought it might be helpful just to step back and just take a few minutes to talk about the last 2 years that I've reviewed the procurement and contract management at the council, as well as portfolio program and project management. In 2020, I reviewed the central procurement function to understand how it was supporting council. Observations at that stage were that the function was quite transactional and not strategic in focus. And that's really where a centralized team like that could add a lot of value. I also noted that there was a gap in the organizational wide information around procurement and contract management activity, which is also I believe important for planning and decision making. Since then, the procurement function has transitioned into a commercial partnership function. The council has a procurement strategy, procurement policy, and I understand a contract management framework. So in 2021, we reviewed the strategy and policy, and you would have seen in the report some recommendations that we made for future improvements to those documents when they are next reviewed. I thought I might just pause there, Bruce, in case there were any questions from the report by any of the members around the procurement and contract management work that we have carried out, and observations.
Brilliant. No, I appreciate that, Nicole, and thank you for a bit of that history. It's important to know, and I'm glad you've got your eye on a key area for us as we've been discussing, particularly around our risks and what have you. So thank you, both of you. I wonder, members, if you've got questions you'd like to raise at this stage now for Karen or Nicole. Interesting, Karen. I think everybody has quite rightly focused on what are the positives that are in this report. I always do, because probably in the past life I had to give them in the past. And actually, I think there are at least 5 really important positives, which I say to my elected members, my colleagues, we should actually acknowledge in front of Barbara and her team, because it's up to Barbara and her team to implement this. And I've seen there, and I give you the page reference if you really want it, good project management delivery of the annual report. And I know, Karen, we had our challenges, and you have been very open with me about what those challenges were from the audit universe side of life. But the reality of it was, I think you also acknowledge, and you have in your report, that Wellington City has upped its game, and that's tremendous. It also notes that we have met your tests for honest and ethical behaviour. I prize that highly. So that's not just management, that's also councillors. But again, the report says that we have met the Auditor General's expectations around honesty and ethical behaviour. We already mentioned the control environment, and I do appreciate that, Karen. Again, that's really important that we have it. And in that great double negative, there are no new deficiencies. So that's good. We're in the right place. You've reviewed the IT general control operational effectiveness and essentially given it a tick. Again, reflects well on management. And an important part that you've also commented on, the general probity, particularly in terms of financial prudence. I can't even read my writing, about obligations, etc. In other words, performance, waste and probity. You have essentially said, well, at least in a negative sense, there is nothing that has come to your attention. So that is good. So it is certainly partly involving councillors, but Barbara, again, I think it's important to note what Karen is asserting positively about the way in which council is operating. And even though the rest of the report needs to then deal with some recommendations for improvement, you should never walk past those sorts of positive affirmations about the operation of the council. And I would hope somebody on the track who might give that some highlight somewhere else. Karen, I don't want to necessarily dwell on the recommendations. I mean, I have found them very helpful, very grateful, for instance, even though we have moved down a track with it and we've sent acceptance. I like the fact that you're linking the long-term plan. You mentioned your condition assessment with the fair value assessments and whether there is a link there. There is clearly a link. And I would certainly be encouraging of staff to look for those sort of linkages. We've just been talking about our long-term plan development. It's got to mean something when it comes to the annual report, which is really, really important. Nicole, I've read with interest the procurement and contract management information that you've actually provided, and I think I've noticed I've got it correct here. There is an updated procurement policy going to finance and performance next week, so that's good. I'm keen that the office keeps its eye on such matters. I would note probably a couple of things here that I think is important. We almost tripped up at the end, didn't we, over the Holidays Act, Karen? But I'd like to reflect that we both mutually recognise that is a live issue, and it's complicated. I'm glad we have a program in place to deal with it, but it's one that will and could potentially increasingly affect our disclosures. So I appreciate that. The other thing that I couldn't help notice, and you're well aware, the office is well aware, that we're a group, and actually there are some on your list there that are yet to receive their opinions, and we've heard from at least one, haven't we, to know that that's a challenge, and it's something that certainly as a committee I will be keen as we go into the 21-22 year, we keep a group view on the total audit, Karen, regardless of what the resourcing and what have you goes. So look, that's really important. So I think, Richard, in reading the comments, I'm satisfied that you have taken them seriously, as management have taken them on board, and I have seen an essentially appropriate response to those. So I hope that's comforting from your side, Karen, that you've made observations that we're taking on board and that we'll be keen to see through, and we'll monitor that those recommendations are actually completed. So Karen, I feel like we're probably getting towards the end. So it does say the coming year. Look, let me give you a give. Would have been keen to have seen the audit plan today. You've been upfront to say that there is still, and it's expected, stress within the system to get that to us. I understand that, number one, that should come within the month, and we would be keen to see that within the month. The other thing I understand that you've been able to develop internally is a level of assurance to us that we can get the opinion for Wellington City and Group prior to the coming local authority elections, whether they're the 8th of October. I think it's about right, isn't it? So we should be able to get a sign-off late September. You want to make any comments for us on those two matters at this stage, please?
You are right. You are right on all those things, Bruce. You're well informed, so thank you. Yeah, so I probably just like to say, as part of the commencement of any audit, we reflect on how well it went last year, our resourcing, where the pressure points are. And so as part of talking to Wellington City as well, we've agreed we will just have one big interim audit in May rather than have an interim audit in January. Would have put a lot of pressure on both the City Council and us. So that's, I guess, one of the reasons why we feel we need a bit more time to develop the audit plan. We have also reviewed the composition of the team, and in particular, peer review of the audit as part of reshuffling portfolios, rebalancing portfolios. So that's the other reason. We do have a new peer review director who is very familiar with local government, but I will need to bring him up to speed with Wellington City Council. And the last one is, yes, we will be able to schedule and complete the audit in accordance with the Council's wishes to do that before the general election in October.
And look, and I accept fully on that, Karen, we have to do our bit. But again, as you've acknowledged, good project management has got us a lot in the track. So I'm comfortable that we'll do our side. More importantly, I'm sure that you will be setting up with Sarah and Richard and the team the normal communications that should be going on. Can I just ask one question? One interim for cities is different. I would have thought to at least practice of the old days, and of course I could be cast as being old in the old days. Is there any risk around only having one interim?
Well, part of the interim audit is to do risk assessment and planning. So the risk assessment is really looking at your systems and controls, form a view on whether we can continue to place reliance on those systems and controls. Our assessment is that unless something has changed, and never say never, we probably can assume, based on what we've seen in 2021 audit, that you have good systems in place, you have controls, and we expect to be able to place reliance on them. We still obviously need to do the work in May to confirm that, but at this stage we're reasonably confident. And we'll ask the council too, have there been any control breakdowns that they are aware of? Were key personnel in place? Were controls operating? It's good to always, for this size audit, especially given the nature, the complexity in local government elections, get a chunk of it out of the way in January. But I don't think in this case it would have been any good for the council or us to do that on the back of what was a challenging year last year. In terms of the group audits that were deferred and had yet to be completed, my understanding is they're well on their way to being completed.
Brilliant. Oh, that's positive news after a difficult year. Members, look, I do want to move to the recommendations, but I just wonder whether there's any final questions folk might have for Nicole or for Karen. There being none, can we move to the recommendations? And Haiti, I've just texted through a potential third, look at that, you're brilliant, Haiti, that I would like to suggest that we add to that. So the first one is obviously received the information. The second is that we note the content of the report from Audit New Zealand. It seems a bit, we also, well, we noted that's good. And look, Karen, I'd just like us to note that we will receive the audit plan within a month, and that the group opinion will be available before the 2022 local body elections. Shall we say, we note the advice from the audit director that the audit plan will be received within a month. I think that's really important to us, Karen, and obviously it's a commitment from the city to work diligently towards that, as I know you will, but I think it's important that we record that. So members, if you're comfortable with that, I'll put those three motions. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Roy. Again, any debate on the motion? If I could then please ask you to go to your screens for reactions, green uptick, red cross. Thank you.
That's carried.
Thank you. It's carried. Thank you. Appreciate that. Karen and Nicole, thank you again. Karen, we're always very keen that you feel the welcome mat to be with us at our committees, and like extend an invitation again for 2022. So please look forward to seeing you in the course of the year, and probably some more detailed discussion, obviously, as we work closer actually on the audit process for this year. Thank you. I hope you've had a good break, by the way. That probably should have been what I should have started with. So I don't think it was long enough, but thank you for your time. Thank you for your time too.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Bruce.
Right, if we could move to item 2.7, please, which is the water activity rates setting. Sarah, are you going to speak to this and lead us off on this, please?
Kia ora, Bruce. Yes. So this paper isn't one that I'm overjoyed to be bringing to the committee, but I do think it is really important that we create a culture of raising these issues in a really transparent way and bringing them through the committee structure to talk about how this happened, what we've done about it, and a recommended pathway forward. I take the paper as read, happy to take any questions that the subcommittee might have. But in essence, this paper brings to the attention of the Audit and Risk Subcommittee an error identified in the rate setting process for the water activity, specifically in the water volumetric charge, and a minor error in the fixed charge. This error was identified during management review of revenue against budget, and the paper sort of talks about how the error occurred, some of the measures we've taken to ensure that this doesn't happen again from a systems and process perspective, and a proposed approach forward. Under the LGA, Local Government Act, there are actually limited options for rectifying an error in the rate setting. So there's really two parts in the Act. One is a resetting of the rate, and actually that's not available to council in this instance, as you cannot use a resetting process to increase the rates that you'd set. So the other option you have is replacing the rates under sections 20 and 30 of the Act. To replace the Act, that would be a big process. To replace the rates, you actually need to conduct a special consultative process involving all ratepayers, even though it's only water metered customers who are impacted by this era. You need to notify all ratepayers, you need to notify the Secretary for Local Government, and given the time of the year when we identified this era and what else is going on for council at the moment with the LTP amendment, it's not recommended that we follow that approach. Plus, I also don't think I have the capacity in the team to actually go back and replace those rates and rebuild for the year. That would create an additional operational challenge for us. You'll see that we've recommended to debt fund any lost revenue at the end of the year that aren't offset by other organisational savings or revenue gains, and happy to take any questions that you might have about that.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, look, I hear your point. Not the right paper to be bringing, but I do appreciate. And again, I'd ask members to respect the fact that we have got a very honest paper here from Sarah, and that, in fact, as a council, we've been honest in front of the public with this issue as well. And I do appreciate management's advice that they need to front up over this. So thank you for doing that, Sarah. Sean, then Iona.
Thanks, Sarah. So,
you're very hard to hear, Sean.
I'm quite confused about how. I mean, you can't hear me?
No, can't hear you, mate. Can I you try something different?
Look, I'm going to log back.
Okay. Well, we'll Iona, perhaps you could go now, and hopefully Sean will be back in time.
Okay, thanks, Bruce. And thanks, Sarah. Look, I think it's important to be honest, and mistakes do happen. And of course, being accountable, and I'm sorry, I should have said that in my prior question too. Did elected members miss anything in the back of the documents? And also, did the auditors didn't pick it up?
So no, the councillors haven't missed anything that they would be expected to see. Effectively, what's happened is when we've calculated the rates in the model, which is the big Excel model, the rates calculation is correct in there and correct in the budgeting system. It's when that information is transferred into what we publish in the rates strike, that's when the errors occurred, and we should have reconciliation processes and checking processes that pick that up from a finance process perspective. That's not at a council governance perspective at all. And from an audit perspective, when you're reconciling the rate strike, because we didn't publish the budgeted volumes that we expected, it is really difficult to pick up that there's an error in there. So it's easy to you reconcile a rate times a volume, and you get a total rates take. For these specific targeted rates, there wasn't the volumes that we expect in the strike, and so it would have been easy to miss if you were just reconciling what was published. And the other one, the fixed charge, is so small, the error, that it's lost in the rounding effectively.
And I guess just the follow-up question to that is, look, we've all done that, probably. We've done a wrong formula in an Excel sheet. So obviously you're moving away from that, which is a good thing. So are you confident that, because it's just a human error, right? So that there is more protection in place just to safeguard against the mistakes that we all make. Thank you.
Yeah, to be fair, I don't love using Excel to calculate that volume of revenue. And we have implemented a new system that we will run in parallel with the old rates model, just to give double sort of assurance that things are reconciling and are correct, and then we will move totally away from the Excel system into an automated system.
I think you're saying in the paper, Sarah, you've got the benefit of being able to run two systems in parallel for this coming year, which is probably useful both ways in terms of getting assurance that when you move and migrate to your new system, you've got it right. Sean, you're back. Is there we'll try and hear you again, sir.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can, Sean.
I'll leave my screen off because I'm having some problems with the Wi-Fi. And I'm sorry, Sarah, this was covered already. I guess I'm just a little bit unclear about how a water meter charge becomes part of the rates bill. I'm metered, it gets paid on a monthly or quarterly basis. So I assumed that was just a utility type charge and that we would simply go back to our customers and say, look, really sorry, got it wrong, but here's the bill that you should have got, pay it.
Yeah. So you are correct that the water targeted rate comes for metered customers comes through on a separate invoice. However, it's still covered under the Local Government Act, Rating Act, and we are limited in how we can correct what so it's not just on the bill that it's incorrect. In our long-term plan on our website where we publish it, what we've published as the rate is an incorrect rate. So similar to if you walk into a shop and the cost for a pack of chips is $1.50 and they really should have been $2, they have to charge the customer $1.50.
That old chestnut. I remember
Sean, it's not
and they have that same issue.
You're almost breaking out in song there, which is a bit...
Okay, man, I think we've lost them.
I wonder if you could...
We could do a targeted rate to these customers.
Sean, I'm sorry.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
No, not really, mate. Sorry. Nice try. We'll have to move on, Sean. Jenny?
Thanks. Again, I just wanted to thank you, Sarah, for the briefing that you gave us and for this paper. I think it's excellent. As Councillor Pannett's already said, I think we've all probably made a mistake in Excel at some point, and none of us really want to be in a situation where we're using Excel for these kinds of massive calculations. So it's great that you're working on the transition, moving to a new system, and that we've got someone from Auckland coming down to help us. How is that person arrived? How are we going in terms of the plan that you had in place to sort this out? Are you getting the resources that you need? Is that all happening?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Condi. Yes, so Debbie Acop has started with us at the beginning of January from Auckland Council, and she's adding a lot of value to the team already, just having been through, her reassurance to me was that there won't be any issue that we have here that she didn't come across in Auckland Council at some stage. So, and they're in a great position now. So she's been really useful. We are also engaging an independent third-party consultancy to do that IQA of from policy to system and model through to the setting and the transactional side of the whole rates process, just to provide us with a little bit more assurance moving forward as well. Finally, I have a new sort of manager of financial operations being appointed on a permanent basis. He starts in March, and Debbie Acop from Auckland will be available to help with his induction and support once he's on board as well. So I am really comfortable that we're doing everything we need to do. I still believe there are some risks in the short term as we get through some of the issues, and we do training on new systems and process improvements, so that there is still a little bit of risk in the short term, but in the medium to long term, we're on a really good pathway.
Thank you, Beth.
Thanks, Sarah.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, can you thank Debbie for coming down for us and everybody who's been working on this? We really appreciate that Debbie's been willing to come and pitch in. And just thanks to the people who found the error. That must have been really an uncomfortable moment, but it's great that that we did have systems and people did find it, because as you said, it was actually not easy to find. So it is actually kind of encouraging that we did find it, and as Bruce said recently, with that we've had the Auditor General say that they're happy with our culture of honesty and trust, and I think this is actually a really great example of this. So as uncomfortable as you and your team might be feeling, I also think this is a great example of how to deal with it when things go wrong, and I really want to thank you and the team for that.
Thanks, Councillor Conley.
Sean, it's 3 strikes are out, mate. Can you question across?
Back to where my old office used to be. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you this time.
Yeah, I just want to endorse what Jenny just said, Sarah. So, these things happen, and the important thing is it's brought to your attention so we can address them. So, and I wouldn't expect that any other thing, it would have been dealt with any other way. So let's just move on. So I guess, yeah, it's probably covered. I'm sure you've thought of all these kind of different ways of how we actually get it back off the ratepayers who have got free water. Pushing it into another targeted rate in another year, another LTP, writing to them. Some of these are quite big corporations, am I right?
Yes, you are right in assuming that the large water users from a volumetric perspective well, actually we're number 3, council ourselves. So we are undercharging and under collecting. We're losing and winning all at the same time. The others are sort of, DHB, heavy industry.
So the government. The government's a part of this.
From
big user.
Perspective, the DHB, yes, it's more private enterprise.
The airport.
Yes, yeah, they are on a meter. Yep. Yeah. So the principle.
I don't think we were initially wanting to expose consumption by individual consumers around the city. If I can be honest.
The principle.
I've got another question.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that the average ratepayer will be obviously a bit concerned that $3 million will now be subsidising some of these organisations. And I'll just leave it with you, Sarah, and the General Council to brainstorm the ways that we might be able to alleviate that, shall we say.
Thanks, Councillor Ash.
For that, Sean, but there certainly is an aspect of a holiday for this current year's consumer. The problem is that actually it's going to affect probably the majority of those consumers next year, and that in itself creates a challenge. What I'd just like to reflect, and I just wonder, Heidi, could you please go to the proposed resolutions, please? Diane and I have had a reasonable and hopefully, Diane, from your perspective, fruitful discussion, just to recognise that I think we have probably taken this matter as far as we can, which is substantially to understand or to hear from Sarah, what is the problem, how's it arisen, what are we doing about it? Those sorts of big questions that, thank you, Jenny, you've broadly asked. And so indeed, the third paragraph is actually a really important one from the perspective of the role of the Risk Committee, which is that we have made in the space of this time inquiry. We're satisfied that Sarah's doing her work. There is, and it almost goes back to your point, Sean, a policy question, what do we do about this? That's not directly within the remit of this committee to deal with. I think equally it's important that we do recognise that part of the problem with this issue, it's not a risk, it's an issue, is that actually from a mechanical or transactional perspective, trying to correct it is almost well nigh impossible. And I take on board your points, particularly around the Local Government Rating Act, Sarah, which makes it, and it's probably intended to be that way, difficult to suddenly increase rates when ideally we would. So that does leave you probably with only one area to go, which is a combination of debt and or savings and efficiencies. That's really for Diane's committee to pick up and run with. So consequently, the second recommendation, which is to go to Diane's committee and then on to council, which is actually how do they deal directly with the revenue loss. So to enable debate on this, what I'd like to do is I'd like to move these 3 motions and get a seconder, and then I can see, Diane, you would like to make comment as well. So can I have a seconder to these 3 motions? Thank you, Linda. So we'll open debate on the motions. Diane, you're first off.
Oh, thank you, Bruce. Look, yeah. First of all, just acknowledging that these mistakes do happen, and I absolutely endorse all the previous comments about having a culture where these things can be informed and dealt with, because that's really crucial. And I'm surprised that a council this size has managed to do its rates on spreadsheets for the last 20 years or plus. I mean, I think that there's still the same spreadsheets used that when I was working here, and that was years ago. So yeah, look, all credit to the finance team for getting things updated and brought forward. Just a couple of things for me is about options for how this could be funded. And I think there are a number of different options. So I'm just putting it out there that I appreciate Audit and Risk will have a view about what is able to be done. And I certainly think debt funding is an option. Whether it's the only option, I think that's obviously something for the committee of a whole to determine. So my concern, I suppose, in the way that particular recommendation is worded, but I'm not going to die in a ditch over it, is that you're saying this is the best option, but the best option of what? And I'm not sure whether that's quite your role, but anyway, it's something that will be debated at committee of the whole. But I just want to make a note, and I understand Chair given a heads up on this matter. So whilst the matter was caused through related to assurance, it actually left a $3 million hole in our current budget. And so I think there needs to officers need to think about how the governance layer is informed and at what point, rather than just sort of finding out in a news media release, during the week, when these papers are released. So I just want to make a comment there that I think the governance level should be how we are informed of. I know it's only 1% of the budget, but basically it is $3 million. So I just want to make that comment.
Thanks for that one, Diane. Look, I'm probably going to recommend we keep the wording of that second one. We say debt if necessary. If there are other alternatives that are more palatable, look, I'd leave that for the committee of the whole to work through. The debt funding is somewhat of a de minimis or a last resort if it comes to it. So yes, if we can find other means, that would be great.
I'm sorry I had to go, but thank you, committee, for your work.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Jenny.
Thanks for that, Diane and Bruce. I think it's really, for me, that the intent of that second resolution is just to acknowledge, I think, that the fact that, as Sarah has set out, we don't really have options under the Local Government Act to reset the rate or any of those kinds of options. So I think it's appropriate for this committee to say, look, we've looked into those options. We don't really have any under the current legislation. So unless we can do something clever with revenues or cost saving, which is the purview of the Finance and Performance Committee, then we are going to land in a debt funding situation. So I don't see that resolution as ruling out any possible discussion at Finance and Performance. So I'm very comfortable with it. And thank you to everyone who is working on that.
Brilliant. So look, with that then, I'm sorry, who seconded the motion? I got a second, didn't I?
Yes, that was Linda.
Oh, Linda. Oh, thank you, Linda. Sorry about that. I thought I was probably, I don't know why I'm racing, but I am. Okay, so look, thank you for that, Jenny. And obviously a bit of work yet for council to do with this matter. Sarah, there's been resounding support for the way you've brought this to the committee and been upfront. So as we look to move the motion, I just want to reflect the appreciation of us that you have been upfront. So look, I'll put the motion, please. We then go back to our reaction box, green tick for the motion, and obviously red cross if not. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sean. I think we're all there, aren't we? Yes, we are. Thank you. Heidi, you're right there?
Yes, that's carried.
Brilliant. That's great. Thank you very much. So we're then on to just action tracking. It's a reasonably short report, but if I could get you, Stephen, just to comment very quickly on it, please.
Thanks, Bruce. Look, we'll take the paper as read. All the actions that were needing to be done have been done. So that's probably all I need to say.
Brilliant. So from the chair, I'll move that we receive the information. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Sean. Any discussion on the motion? There being none, I'll put it. Please use your action button as normal. Thanks, Roy. Brilliant. We're all there, aren't we? That's great. So again, motion is carried. I think we're right there, Heidi. Thank you. Right. 2.9 is the forward program, which I thought was this interesting paper. So Stephen, in your hands again, please.
Thanks, Chair. The forward program really is a reflection of the 3-year work program that you just approved earlier. As Rich mentioned, we will probably try and consolidate some of those items into lesser reports because there's some that naturally kind of coalesce together. But that's an indication of the topics, and I think it's a move from where this committee used to operate, which was a few kind of repetitive items, whereas there's a much broader agenda which is aligned to the terms of reference.
Thank you for that, Stephen. And yes, we will make it even better as we go on. I'm confident about that. Do we have any questions? Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, thanks. So, Stephen, if I recall rightly, in election year, the CEO issues a kind of state of the city document. Does that come through finance, audit and risk to be sort of like, you know, given the once over?
No, but Barbara may wish to answer this, but this is one occasion where the Chief Executive under statute has to issue a pre-election report unfettered by any other council process. But Barbara, you may.
Well, I think, yeah, through you, Chair, I think that you've probably said it, Stephen. It is completely independent of the governing body, this particular report. And
I can understand that.
Yeah, there are guidelines. There are guidelines as to the minimum information that should be expressed in the report, and we'll make sure that it's a balanced, appropriately balanced reflection from a chief executive. I think you have to take very great care that it never appears to have a political overtone.
Yeah, good as gold. I was just checking.
Yeah, thank you.
Although I would just note with that, Sean, I think it's good also that as part of your LTP planning, you've recognised in your process that pre-election report. So well done. But yes, Sean, the advice you've been given is absolutely correct. Sorry, Polly, stay right away from this report. It's designed so that you can take it on the things as a neutral report from management and make what you will of it with your potential electors. So that's the story there.
You can just imagine the list of amendments if it was otherwise.
Absolutely, and even I was independent, couldn't control you, Sean, I'm sure.
It makes Shelley Bay look like a walk in the park.
That's right. I wonder if we could then move to the motion, to the recommended motion that we receive the information. I'd like to move that. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Sean. Is there any debate on the motion? There being none, I'll put it. Again, you could move to the reaction button, please. Green for yes and red cross for no. We're all there.
That's everyone. Thank you.
I think we're all there, aren't we? Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Heidi. That's great. Right, we've come to nearly the end of our meeting. I just want to remind that after I have said the karakia that we will go into a short period of committee only time with Barbara and a couple of other matters as well. So I'd ask you not to totally get off as quickly as I finish the karakia. That would be great. So if you could just join with me in the conclusion. Unahia ki te uru tapanui. ki watea, ki mama, ki na kou, ti tinana, ti wairoa, i te ara takatu, koia rā e rongo, whakairia, ake ki runga, ki watea, e rā, ki kua watea. Let all this be done in unity. Thank you. You've been a very unified team for me today and gone well. So I would like to declare the meeting closed. Heidi, if you could just let me know when we're finished recording, and then we will just quickly go into some